Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 12th, 2024 meeting of the Northborough Select Board celebrating the 215th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. I have some opening announcements as always. This open meeting of the Northborough Select Board is being conducted remotely consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Northborough Select Board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Act allows the Northborough Select Board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream or the recording of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting, as always, will feature public comment. I will now go around the virtual room and make sure everyone can hear and be heard in the order on my screen. Kristen Wickstead.
Hello.
Laura Zeiton.
Here.
Lisa Maselli.
Here.
Julianne Hirsch.
Here.
Town Administrator Tim McInerney.
Hello, here.
And Assistant Town Administrator Diane Wackel.
Here.
Excellent. We also have Owen from Northborough Cable with us for the technical assistance. And with that, let's get started. First up, we have a couple of sets of, actually, first up, as always, we have public comment. Before even the meeting minutes, if there is anyone in our virtual audience that wishes to speak to anything, ideally things that are not on the agenda, but even if they are, that is fine. I'll be happy to recognize you. We already have a hand up. Ginny Lemmerman. Ginny, if you could unmute, identify yourself, and let us know what's on your mind, please.
Hi, I'm Ginny. Can you hear me?
We hear you, Ginny.
I am at 176 Howard Street. And I am actually just jumping in with a couple questions.
Sure.
I recently retired and started getting interested in kind of giving more back and getting involved in different town activities. And I found a group of people that were calling ourselves Sustainable Northborough. But one of the issues that we're finding is it's hard to figure out who's in charge of what in the town in terms of issues. And so because they're all separate meetings, is we just kind of need to know which meeting do we need to go to follow this issue. And so we're trying to kind of put together things that are environmentally related for the climate change and sustainable growth. And Mitch, I sent you an email this afternoon about an idea we have of kind of helping other people in Northborough quickly get an idea of what's going on without having to sit through as many meetings as you folks have to sit through. And so I sent that on to you, Mitch, just to let you know about a series of educational like walk and talks that we're trying to put together for most of them in April. And we bumped into a few kind of just, we don't know who to ask or who to be in contact with. And one of the issues is we're really interested in the aqueduct bridge, but pedestrian access to go across. And we know that the town paid for like a report about it or whatever, but who's in charge of that?
Broadly speaking, the town administrator's office would be in charge of just about everything. That particular one, I believe, falls underneath that with the town planner.
And the town planner is Tim? No, he's the administrator. Hi, Tim.
Lori Connors. Tim, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we talked about this morning, Mr. Chair. You were there. We can follow up on this. I know I heard the report twice in one day, so we'll find it and we can work on that.
Great. Okay. And so just and let us know who or which meeting is going to talk about it next. And so we can be sure to stay in touch and then kind of recap things for, the public as it is. The other question is, who's in charge of the property that's being proposed to be bought, the 432 Whitney Street? Is that you, Tim, too? The process? And that's going on. That's time sensitive, right? And so due diligence is happening right now?
It's anticipated that will be presented at our annual town meeting in April.
Okay, so who would we do we kind of tell that we'd like to know if the EPA report comes back, or like what the status is before our meeting in April, just so we can share the information?
Sure, I think Tim would be the perfect person for that. Also, not to volunteer you
Okay.
for everything, Tim, but that's it's in the job description.
Great.
Well, Ginny, you want me to answer your question through the chair?
Sure.
So when Gene, right? Did we meet with Gene this morning? That was one of the folks that is interested in this committee.
Yes.
A, in this report, and B, she wants to provide some kind of technical oversight of the soil sampling. So I can give an update to the board on that now, or I could cover it in my.
Yeah, why don't you cover it in reports a little bit later in the meeting?
Okay, that's all I've got. Mitch, you can forward my email to Tim now. I didn't know who to
Yes,
send
I
it
will.
to
I'll
when I
make sure
knew
to
you.
send it out to everybody on the board. I've been out all afternoon, but I did see your email. I'll make sure everybody has it.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Great.
You folks are doing a great job.
Thanks, Ginny. All right, have a good night. Okay, is there anyone else from the audience that has anything for public input? If not, we will continue with our agenda, going once, going twice. Okay, moving right along to meeting minutes. We have two sets. We have December 18th, which underwent some revisions, and were distributed to everybody. Would someone like to make a motion or have any comment on that?
Don't have any comment on the 18th. So I would move the board to approve the December 18th, 2023 meeting minutes as now presented.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Lisa, seconded by Laura. Any discussion? All those in favor, Lisa,
Aye.
Laura,
Aye.
Julianne,
Aye.
Kristen.
Hi.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Meeting minutes of December 18th are approved. And next up, we have January 8th. Does anyone have any comments on that?
Is it possible to postpone this? Because I did want to make some updates to my report. I just didn't have a chance, and I apologize for that. But if I can come back to that one at our next meeting, that would be appreciated.
It's fine with me. Anyone have any objection?
Nope, I agree.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So January 8th, we will take up at our next regular meeting. And if
Thank
anyone
you.
who has any comments, get them to the office, and we'll get them amended as
Thank you.
appropriate. Sure. Oh, yeah. With that, we will move on to municipal aggregation. Diane, do you want to kick us off for that, or Tim?
Tim, you want to speak to that, or you want me to?
Sure. As the board knows, you passed some legislation at town meeting that allowed the community to aggregate the entire load of the community, and we are kicking off the comment period now, starting tomorrow. It'll run until, I think, March 16th is the date. Marlena Patton is here. She's the consultant.
Want me to bring her in?
You could bring her in, and we
Okay.
can start that public comment period.
Excellent. Very excited about starting this process.
Yes.
Okay. And if you could unmute, there you go, unmute yourself, and welcome to our meeting.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice to see everybody. Tim, are you still talking? My whole screen reloaded, so are you still talking, or is it my turn?
It's up to the chair, but I think it's on you.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right. Terrific. Well, hi. Nice to see everybody. My name is Marlena Patton, and I'm with Mass Power Choice, which, as Tim said, is your town aggregation consulting company. And I'm going to step us through a slide presentation, the purpose of which is, as Tim said, to kick off a public comment period. So to provide some framework before you're stuck looking at PowerPoint slides, the Department of Public Utilities regulates aggregation programs, and Northborough has developed some required documentation that we have to submit to the Department of Public Utilities for their review and approval before you can launch your program. Before we can submit it, we need to make it available to the public for review and comment for a period of 30 days. So today's presentation is kicking that off, and I'll be going through the basics of how the program will work. The aggregation plan document itself is really written for regulators. There's this requirement to make it available to the public, but it's not that easy to follow. So what this presentation does is it kind of takes the core pieces of how aggregation works and organizes it in a way that's a little bit easier to get your head around, hopefully. So with that, I'll share my screen. Just a second. All right, so does everybody see the presentation?
We do. And a quick question before you begin. Do you prefer us wait for questions or ask questions as you go?
Yeah, I think it's really up to you. I'm okay if you want to ask along the way. I know with Zoom it can be tricky, so if you're asking a question and I'm still talking, it might just be that I didn't hear you, but shout louder and I'm sure I'll stop. So here we are, our opening slide, an introduction to Northborough Power Choice. Big important detail already on this cover slide is that it's an electricity program from and for the town of Northborough. So this is going to be something that's specific for the community, and it's a municipal program. It's not my company's program. We're here to just help you folks do what you want to do. So as I said, why we're here, this is a public presentation about Northborough's aggregation plan. And as Tim said, there's a period of public comment. Public comments are accepted until the 13th, and there's some details about how to submit comments available at the end and then also on the municipal website. So what is Northborough Power Choice? It's a municipal electricity aggregation program, which is a mouthful. And if it leaves you as confused as the dog on this screen, you can think of it also as a form of group electricity purchasing for a city or town. And it's also a transparent municipal alternative to all the electricity marketing that we all get in the mail and over the phone, and for some of us, even sometimes at our door. So why participate in the program? Well, there's a couple key reasons, a couple key benefits to electricity customers. The big one is competitive, stable electricity supply prices. We all are probably still in therapy from last winter when National Grid's prices skyrocketed to the highest in 14 years. A program like Northborough Power Choice is going to protect consumers from that, because you'll be able to sign long-term fixed price contracts that don't change seasonally. So it's a big, big benefit, that predictability in your price, your electricity supply. A piece of that is that the program has the potential to provide savings compared to National Grid's prices as well. But it's important to note that we can't ever guarantee savings, and that's because Northborough is going to sign a long-term fixed price contract. And by law, National Grid has to go out and buy electricity every 6 months or less. So their prices fluctuate every 6 months or less, and we don't know what their future prices are. But the hope is that the program is going to be able to provide some savings compared with the average of National Grid's changing prices. And then another big benefit is consumer protection. So this really makes the program distinct from a lot of those private offers that I mentioned. One of the big ones is that you can leave the program at any time with no fee or penalty. So sometimes when you sign up with a private company, you have to agree to participate with them for a period of time. And if you try to move away before that, you get $150 termination fee on your electric bill. That's not going to be a part of Northborough Power Choice. Consumers are always going to be free to leave whenever they want with no fee or penalty. There are also a lot of protections around consumer information, and the supplier is not allowed to use it for marketing to consumers without the town's permission, which pretty much means the suppliers can't use it to market to consumers. So one thing I always like to get out up front is that Northborough Power Choice is not going to replace National Grid as Northborough's electric utility. National Grid has a geographic monopoly. If you live in Northborough, they're your electric utility. They own the poles and the wires. They're always going to deliver electricity to you, and there's no choice in that. But what you do have a choice in is your supplier, meaning the company that buys electricity and puts it on the grid for you. So National Grid can do that for you, but Northborough has the freedom to choose another company. And so that's where aggregation comes in. To understand it a little better, it can help to understand that there's actually 3 ways for consumers to buy electricity in Massachusetts. First is the default. That's when you have National Grid buy it for you, and that's called basic service. So that's what we get when we open our electricity account. We have National Grid's basic service, and that means that National Grid is providing us with 2 services. They're delivering our electricity, which we just said they're always going to do, and also they're going to the market and buying it every 6 months or less, as I also mentioned a moment ago. So that's called basic service. And when you have basic service, that's the price that changes seasonally for your bill. The second option is to sign one of those private contracts that I mentioned a moment ago with a commercial electricity supplier. And when you do that, National Grid is still your utility. They're still sending you your bill. But when they calculate your bill and they calculate the supply services charge on your bill, they're going to use the price that you secured with that private contract to calculate that piece of your bill. So you no longer have their basic service, you have a contract with a private supplier. And then the third option is if your city or town signs a contract that you can benefit from. So that is what aggregation is, and that's what Northborough Power Choice is. So in that case, National Grid is still your utility, they're still sending the bill, but when they calculate the supply charge on your bill, they're going to use a Northborough Power Choice price to calculate it. Did I hear a question? I felt like I heard a voice. Everybody still good? Okay, I'll soldier on. So here's a picture of what I was just trying to describe with words. So before Northborough Power Choice begins, we have National Grid providing 2 services there on the left side of the diagram, supply and delivery. And we have the customer on the right side. We're over there receiving electricity and delighted. With Northborough Power Choice, you'll see it's really the same diagram. It's just we put the supply part in a different color, but it's the same components. So that means we've got a new entity as the supply part, the company that goes out and buys the electricity and makes sure it's put on the grid for us. The National Grid is still there, connected to the end user with no change in that relationship. They're still delivering electricity. There's no interruption in that. That whole piece is still working the same way. It's just that supply piece that's changing. Now, within Northborough Power Choice, there are going to be options that have different prices. So we mentioned that when you have basic service, you have the basic service price, and that changes every 6 months. And that's just one price, for example, if you're a residential customer. But Northborough Power Choice is going to give consumers 2 options. The first is going to be Northborough Standard, and that's going to be what's called the default, meaning the town has to choose one that you get if you don't request something else. So that's the standard, and that's going to be the cheapest option in the program. Northborough Standard is going to have the minimum amount of renewable energy required by law. All electricity has to have some renewable energy. That's a state law. So it'll have the minimum amount required by law, which is the same as what you get from National Grid. So it's really going to give you the same electricity mix you get from National Grid, but a Northborough price for it. So it's the cheapest option that you're going to be able to get doing the aggregation, and the town's decided to call that Northborough Standard. There's also going to...
Quick question. What's the percentage right now of the renewables in the basic, or what you're proposing as the standard?
This year it is 62%.
Okay.
And within that, there's a bunch of different categories. 24% of that comes from what are called Mass Class 1 RECs. That's the high quality, newer renewable energy projects in New England that environmental advocates value. And then the rest is a mix of older renewable projects, some stuff that is renewable, but not necessarily clean, like trash to energy, and some stuff that is clean, but not necessarily what we would call renewable, like nuclear.
Okay.
As I was saying, there's going to be an option in the program. You're going to have to ask for it. It's going to cost a little bit more, and that's Northborough Green. So that one you can choose if you want to get 100% of your electricity from renewable sources, but it's going to be an option. It's not the default. And then if you don't want to participate, and nobody ever has to participate, there's National Grid's basic service. It's always there. You can always opt out of the program. And as I said, it's really the same electricity mix as Northborough standard. It's just the National Grid price for it. And that's the price that changes all the time. Northborough's price is going to be a long-term fixed stable price.
I have a question
Sure.
on that prior screen. I know you're proposing with this two options with a sort of the cheapest as the standard, and then one sort of a buy-up option for 100% renewable. I know a number of towns are doing three options, which is something I would like us to consider, where the default would be somewhere in the middle, maybe 80% renewable or something like that. That would be the default. And that's because a lot of people in town are, of course, concerned about the price of electricity. A lot of people in town are also very concerned about the environment. And I think that strikes a reasonable balance. And the towns that have the middle choice also will have a basic. That would be if your priority is cost and cost alone to go down to the minimum. And then, of course, the 100% if your primary objective is the environment and renewables. So I assume that we can craft that type of plan as well, correct?
Yes, we would need to revise your aggregation plan and the materials before we submit everything to the DPU, correct?
Yep. All right, Laura, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick question. So will people have the option to choose whichever one they want, or do we as a town have to pick one and then everyone has to adopt that option?
So the program's always going to have the options that you include in it, whether that's two or three. The town has to choose one that's the default, meaning the one people get if they don't choose something else.
Got it.
Okay. So when this presentation is over, I think I would like to hear from members of the board on any thoughts to any alterations that we might want to make to these documents, so the public can have a chance to comment on. We don't have to do that right now, but that's certainly an item that I'm interested in having us discuss and coming to consensus one way or the other on that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so moving on, just to clarify for those folks who aren't as familiar with their bills, where you're going to see this on the bill. So Northborough Power Choice will impact the supply services charge on the bill. So if you're looking at your bill, it can be confusing. The first thing you see is actually typically delivery services. That's the whole first part of the bill. And it's all these line items. And that is not at all what Northborough Power Choice is going to impact. So you actually want to move past all of that. And everybody looks at it and says, where is the program? It's not there. So you want to keep going until you see supply services. It's usually in the bottom of the first page or the top of the second page of your bill. And there is a price there. There's the total price is going to be impacted. You'll see the supplier. And then also there's the electricity supply price there. You see there's a little math problem with a decimal right there. The decimal is 0.10554 times and then a number with kilowatt hours. So that decimal 0.10554, that's the one that's actually going to change. And then also the supplier name will change, but you're not going to see any other changes on the bill. That's it. Now, the program is going to change that part of the bill. And depending on which option you choose, you might get more of your electricity from renewable sources. The good news is that this is not a program that's going to completely revamp everything. As I said before, National Grid is still going to be your utility. And that really means your primary relationship for electricity as a consumer is going to remain with National Grid. So they're still going to deliver your electricity. You're still going to call them if the power goes out. They're still responsible for addressing power outages. They're the ones who are going to send the bill. You're going to pay them. And it's the only electric bill you're going to receive as a participant in this program. This program does not result in you getting a different or separate bill. And importantly, if you're eligible for any discounts from National Grid, like a low income discount, you're still going to receive that discount or whatever discount you're eligible for. Participating in the program is going to be very easy, and that's because most people are going to get automatically enrolled. It's a state law that electricity aggregation programs have to use an automatic enrollment model. That isn't something Northborough has a choice in. Specifically, the folks who will be enrolled will be those who have not signed a private contract with an electricity supplier. So if you have National Grid's basic service, you remember that's the default. That's what you get when you first open your account. That's the price that changes seasonally. If you have that, then you're going to be eligible for automatic enrollment in the program. But it's not going to happen secretly. You get a formal notice in the mail from the town bearing the town seal before you're enrolled. And I make a point about the town seal because all these electricity suppliers have gotten wise to the fact that aggregations are happening and they start to make their materials look kind of municipal in style. And that confuses a lot of people. So it's just really important to know to always look for the town seal, to know you're looking at something that's legitimate and trustworthy.
Of course, it is against state law to use the town seal if you're not the state.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then there's that, yes.
Yeah.
And then as I mentioned before, participation is never required. So there's an automatic enrollment model, but it doesn't mean you have to participate. You can opt out before you're enrolled, and you'll get that notification in the mail about enrollment and plenty of time to do that. You'll have 30 days to opt out, or you can try the program and opt out later with no penalty or fee. So some common questions. What if I don't have basic service and I signed a contract with an electricity supplier already? You're not going to be automatically enrolled. Your contract is going to be honored. You're not going to be on the mailing list for that automatic notification, enrollment notification mail that goes out. But you can join. You'll just need to go on the website and fill out a form or call customer support and provide your account information. So it's going to be easy to join. You're just going to have to take a step. What if you have solar panels or you participate in community solar and you've been getting credits or incentive payments? None of that changes either. It's completely independent. And specifically, something people worry about a lot, there's no change in how your credits or your incentive payments are calculated. You can change to a different electricity supplier and a different price for the supply part of your bill, and it won't impact how those credits are calculated. And so it actually means they might go a little further. They'll continue to be calculated based on the basic service price, which could be higher, but the underlying bill you're applying them to could be lower if Northborough gets a really good competitive price. So it can work really well.
A question about that somebody asked me. I don't have solar panels on my house, but a number of people do and participate in net metering programs that essentially sells electricity back to the grid when there's a surplus in the house. Is that then sold then at the national grid basic rate, or is that sold at the same price that customer would currently be paying if they were using electricity?
Net metering credits are based on the basic service price.
Okay.
So if the customer has basic service, well, back up. So they're based on they're calculated based on the basic service price. Their calculation is not connected to the supply price that the customer is paying. Okay. So that's what I was saying, that if you participate in community solar or you have panels on your roof and you're getting credits on your bill, there's no change in how that stuff is calculated. The only change is in the price that you pay for the electricity you're buying. And that's how this program really impacts you. It impacts you when you're buying electricity from the grid. So if your solar panels are producing all day, you're not buying electricity from the grid, but they're not producing at night. So you have to buy some. And then you're getting credits for that production during the day if you sold some back into the grid. And those credits are calculated based on the basic service price, but that bill you get is going to be calculated based on the Northborough price. And so those credits might go a little further than they would if the bill and the credits were both calculated based on the basic service price.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then finally, low income discount. If you're eligible for that, you still get it, no change. Tell everybody this is something people worry about. You're still going to get the low income discount. That's a discount that goes on the total bill. So it gets calculated, the supply charge gets calculated based on the Northborough price, the delivery charge gets calculated based on the magical formula that exists for that, and then the low income discount is applied on top. So the timeline is here, and I'll offer a big caveat that there's a lot that's changing now. So this is the timeline that we've kind of been using for a while. Everything starts with a public vote on the far left, which Northborough did, and we're in this aggregation plan development and public review phase, this first blue bar. And once we get done with this public comment period, then we start the regulatory review process, which is this big long green line, and it says 12 months or more. And that's because that has been the recent history. You may have heard that the DPU got a little slow and approvals were taking 12 months and often longer. They have been working very hard very recently, I'd say starting in December, to try to figure out a new way of doing things. And things do seem to be moving in the right direction. We've been collaborating with the other consultants and participating in technical sessions with the DPU to come up with a new set of guidelines for how aggregations are going to work. And included in part of that is an accelerated review and approval process for the DPU. It hasn't been finalized yet, though, the new guidelines, and I can't give you an idea about when. But within them, the last version I saw indicated that their review would take just a few months as opposed to a few years. So we're very optimistic that Northborough is not going to have the same experience that everyone else has had. And in fact, for some of the programs we've more recently submitted, even though there aren't new guidelines in place, the DPU has already been moving a little bit faster. We can see it. So we're optimistic for you folks. So once we get through that regulatory review process, which is not something we have any control over, but we're hopeful about, that's when Northborough goes out and signs an electricity supply contract, that second yellow bar there. And that's a big deal because that's when you folks will make your decisions about if you add a third option and you want to have extra renewable energy, that's when you would make the decision about how much extra, because you would be able to see prices and how much it's going to cost, the impact of it on the program price. That's when you'll choose your electricity supplier, you'll sign a contract, lock in prices, and you'll know when the program's going to launch. So then we have all the details we can give to the public. So after that comes that second blue bar, public education and outreach. That's when that notice goes out that I mentioned in an earlier slide about automatic enrollment. So that's when that notice gets put in the mail. There's public education, public information sessions, social media, press release, that kind of thing. And once we get through that period, which is about 6 to 8 weeks or so, then the program launches. And it's actually kind of an anticlimactic. At that point, people just start seeing the price on their bills. So how is everyone going to get more information? That's often what people want to know right about now. I mentioned that last blue bar in that previous slide, that outreach and education period, is about 6 to 8 weeks before launch. And that's when you get that notice in the mail, announcement, a lot of what I just said. The program website, that middle piece there, that's actually already up. We have an early version of that up and running that has some basic information about how aggregation works on it. And customer support is also available. Our team is already able to take calls and answer emails if folks want to write in with questions. So that's just a snapshot of part of the homepage. So you can stop by and take a look at that. And then just to wrap it up, back to the original purpose, public comments are accepted until March 13th. The aggregation plan and the associated documents that are available for public review are on the municipal website and northboroughpoweredchoice.com, and you can get hard copies as well. And you can get information on how to submit your written comments on the municipal site or Northborough Powered Choice also. So that wraps up my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you. I do see one hand up from the audience, but I want the board members to ask some questions, and then we'll do that. Lisa, I see your hand up.
Hi. The contract that we're signing, what is the time limit on that? Is it a 2-year, 4-year, 6-year? What's the actual contract time we will have?
The electricity supply contract, those are typically 1 to 3 year contracts. Going out longer than 3 years is pretty risky, given that the electricity supply market is constantly changing like any financial market. So typically communities are signing 1 to 3 year contracts.
Okay. And do they, is there an additional charge for all the assistance that we're getting, or is that paid for by the electric company?
So you mean how is my company getting paid? So our fee is baked into the price, actually. So we don't get paid now. We're not getting paid now. We get paid once the program's launched, and we're paid the way an electricity broker is paid. There's a small portion of the price that the electricity supply company offers as a contract price that will then come to us. They'll cut a check to us.
Okay. Just on a personal question, I have two different bills that come to my house. Does the town know that I have two bills? How would they know? Is it the information coming from the electric company?
National Grid will provide all of the account information. Yep, we get it straight from the utility.
Okay. And when will we know what the amount is going to be? Or have we already secured an amount?
You mean the price? So that is not something that's going to happen until after the regulatory review process is finished and you get regulatory approval. Then the town will go out to bid and get prices from multiple electricity supply companies, and we'll help you do that. And you'll sign a contract at that point. So it's pretty far down the road.
Right. And will the homeowner get a notification individually about this amount and the contract? So they have a copy of it?
Yes, so that's the mailing that I was referencing. So anyone that's eligible for automatic enrollment gets a notification in the mail. It's a regulatory requirement that it has to be presented as an official town communication. So we'll bear the town seal, and that really helps folks weed out weed out the marketing and understand that this is a legit communication. But yes, that goes out after you sign that supply contract. Then that mailing goes out. Your electricity supplier will cover the cost of it. So the town is not bearing the cost of that mailing. They'll cover the cost and implement it. And then consumers will have 30 days to look it over, look at the prices, look at their options, and decide if they want to be automatically enrolled or not.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Other questions from the board? I've got a couple other questions. The one thing that I believe that we can do through one of these, similar to how your company gets a tiny little percentage of the bill, I know a number of towns fund sustainability efforts within the municipal government through a similar model. Is that part of what this proposal has right now, or is that something that we also ask you to add in?
So the town decided not to include, you're talking about an operational adder. And so
Okay.
that has not been included in these documents.
Okay. The board hasn't discussed that, so I don't know where any such decision was made.
Well, that was the information we were given when we were putting the documents together. So there's no operational adder included in these documents.
Is it too late to include that?
So the DPU feels very strongly that an operational adder, if it's included, it needs to be included for the full duration of a public comment period. So if you'd like to add one, we would probably need to start the public comment period over.
And it started, didn't it start today?
Well, it would start tomorrow.
Okay.
You would have to notice it though. So you have to do all the noticing in advance again.
I'm very concerned about this because the board had no discussion at all about any of these things prior to us seeing the proposal. So I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through the chair.
Yeah, Diane.
That came from our office, the administration office.
Okay.
These are decisions that I made along with kind of looking at other communities. It was basically our office that made those decisions.
Okay. Yeah, those are policy decisions that I think should have come through the board.
I apologize.
Okay. Yeah, I know a number of towns fund, for example, a part-time or part of a salary for a sustainability director through that sort of operation. And I think that is at least worthwhile for the town to have a discussion on.
Okay.
Another question, if someone, you mentioned earlier that somebody could opt out and go with a separate provider. If somebody did that, can they then opt back in?
Yes, with a caveat. So people can opt back in, but they're not necessarily going to get the program price if they opt back in. There's a caveat in the electricity supply contract that says for people who opt out and come back, the supplier is allowed to charge a market price if they wish. It's up to the supplier whether or not to invoke that. The reason for that is because it can be very expensive for electricity suppliers to be held to a contract price for customers that they were no longer expecting to serve. and then they have to go out and buy electricity for those customers in a market that's more expensive. The suppliers didn't used to ever invoke that provision for years and years, and then last winter happened, and now they're all paying very close attention to that provision. So it's definitely in there. But whether or not they choose to invoke it will really depend on the supplier that Northborough signs a contract with and what the market is at the time.
Okay. Thank you. That's good information. And my last question for now is the public comment process that is open until March 13th or whatever the date turns out to be. Who are those comments going to, and who reviews them to see if there are any changes warranted?
So I don't know who is on the receiving end of the email address that was set up. I don't know if Diane, is that something
Yeah,
that you
that would
could?
be our office.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that was really the question. Does it go to the town or does it go to your company?
Yeah, it would come to our office.
Okay. And if comments come in that we want to make changes based upon those comments, we can still make those changes at that point?
Yep, that is the purpose of the public comment period.
Okay. But for example, that operational adder, we would not be able to make those changes without starting the process over again?
That is my understanding. We actually have specific experience with that.
Okay.
We had a community that did a public comment period, and after that decided they wanted to add the adder. And we got into the DPU review and approval process, and it became a huge sticking point, and we had to take it out of their aggregation plan because it hadn't been publicly made available for review.
Okay. And the question about having 2 versus 3 choices, is that something that would also trigger that process, or is that a little bit separate?
Nope. Your aggregation plan actually specifically says that the town will have, actually, let me look at the wording because I actually looked at this morning. The wording is initially, comma, there will be 2 products. And then it goes on to say additional products may be added with the approval of the select board. So that's the language that we've gone out to the public with. So I think that gives you guys an arguable reason that you could change that if you wanted.
And we could change that for launch.
Yes, we would want to change it before it goes to the DPU. We couldn't change it after they've given approval, but we should be able to change it before we submit it, correct?
Okay. Okay. Excellent. So there had been a couple of hands up in the audience. They've gone down. So my assumption is those questions were answered. Are there other questions from board members at this time? Julianne.
So when do we discuss this operational adder?
This would probably be the time to do that. Yeah, the operational adder. And I think we should, I'd like to have a conversation about the 2 versus 3 options also, so that Marlena has something to go on there. Did you have a thought on that, Julianne?
Well, I'd like to know some numbers, like how much more would it cost the customer, and what kind of money would the town receive?
So I can help with that. The way it's done is you ask for up to a certain amount from the DPU per kilowatt hour, and the typical amount is 1/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour. We haven't seen them approve. I don't think I've seen them approve more than that in a while. So it's typically 1/10 of a cent. And for Northborough, I think that would be a maximum of about $50,000 per year.
And a person's bill?
Sorry?
How would it affect the average bill?
So if you think of the price, say your price is 10.1 cents per kilowatt hour, that 0.1 would be the adder price, and you would multiply that by however many kilowatt hours somebody uses. So let's just say, for example, if I do the math right now, somebody uses 650 kilowatt hours per month, that would be an extra 65 cents, I think, per month. The caveat for how it can be used is it's considered a program fee under municipal finance law. So it must be used for the benefit of program participants. There has to be a direct tie. In recent years, the DPU has only approved this for a municipal staff person who works on the program for the portion of their time that is used for the program.
So that would, in this case, it might be Diane?
Yes, it could be. You don't have to necessarily hire an individual person. It could be a portion of somebody's salary.
I think
Okay.
oftentimes if a town will hire or name someone as a sustainability director or some title like that and fund part of their salary, or sometimes all of their salary with that amount, and that person would be responsible for not just the maintenance of this plan, but other, you'd want that person to be responsible for other sustainability operations, looking for grants, looking, trying to get more solar panels on roofs, EV chargers, more efficient, looking for more efficient HVAC systems. Could be any of those things, as well as outreach. And I imagine there would probably be some cross interest in recycling and things like that that aren't sustainability in the same way, but in terms of electricity, but in other ways, I think would be eligible.
So it has to be used for clean energy or something in that whole realm.
It specifically has to be used for the purposes of the program. So it is not the case that you could use this money for like a recycling program. It would have to be used for the benefit of program participants in connection to their participation in the program. I see that my colleague Paul Gromer actually was just able to join us. He finished up another thing, and he can actually talk further about the adder. Would it be possible to bring him in?
I'll do that now. Hey, Paul, if you could unmute, turn on your camera if you'd like. I guess introduce yourself, and it sounds like you're already following the discussion. Hi, Paul.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. Sorry to be a little late for the start, but I'm happy to talk more about the adder if that would be helpful. But really, just to echo what Marlena said, which is that you're exactly right. Many communities do have an adder. The requirement is that because it's a program fee paid by program participants, it be used for the benefit of the program. And often it's used for a staff person. And how you define the program, there's a tiny bit of flexibility. So you could define the program as just the program in the most narrow sense, or you could define the program a little bit more broadly and provide, for example, enhanced information to residents about clean energy initiatives and other things, and make that a part of your program, which would give you a little bit more flexibility in the use of the funds. And then I can also add or echo something Marlena said earlier, which is that this whole area is an area where the regulatory requirements are in flux. And the new Department of Public Utilities commissioners appointed by Governor Healy are starting to take a more flexible view about what the program is and how these funds can be spent. All that hasn't been decided yet, so we're in a gray area now, but there's a possibility for more flexibility for you in the future. And then I'll just also echo what Marlena said before, which is that if you did want to add this, and 100%, you can make any changes to this plan you want. It's your plan, right? So we've drafted up a draft for you, but it's for your consideration. You can change it all you want. The only limitation is if you want to make a major change, you just start the public comment period over again, but it only starts tomorrow anyway. So there's not a big loss there, but complete flexibility for you at this point to shape this however you'd like it to be.
Great. Could we, in theory, so that I'll call it the dollar amount, but it's a 1/10 of a cent amount for an adder. Is there flexibility that we can make over time with that? Or do we determine that at the beginning and say it's going to be a 1/10 of a cent and that's how it's going to be forever?
That's a really good question. So you've put your finger right on the heart of something that's in flux here, is to what extent towns could revise this. I mean, certainly you could revise it if you wanted to go back to the DPU again and get their permission. But I'm sure what's behind your question is what could the town do by its own decision, and whether you could increase the amount without going back to the regulators I don't know yet how they're going to come out.
My thinking is actually, could we decrease the amount at some point? So, for example, if we decided tonight that we do want the program adder, and it's, that it's 1/10 of a cent, could we later, if we get significant public comment that people don't like this idea, could we turn that back to 0 at some point in the future? Or if, let's say, in 3 years, we hit a period where the costs have gone up considerably, and maybe at that point the board says, you know what, people are going to be paying even more for electricity now. Maybe at that point we're not getting a lot out of the use of those funds. Maybe for this contract, for the 6-month period or year period or whatever, we zero that out or put it down to, 1/2 of a 1/10 of a cent. And then go back up to the 1/10 of a cent later. Is that flexibility available?
Yes, absolutely. And that's built in. So what you'd be requesting is approval to collect up to a maximum amount, and you can always collect less or 0.
Okay.
And
That's great.
Is it worth also adding that this also means you could put in the plan that you want authorization to collect it, and then still decide not to collect it when the program launches? You've just kind of baked in the authorization for the future, which you could then invoke at a later date.
Okay. I like the flexibility of that. Okay. If there are no other questions for the board, or even if there are, I'm curious. Or Julianne.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I need a little more information about how the money's used. So let's just use the $50,000. And I heard you say something about you could use it for educating the customers. Could you give some other examples of how that money would have to be used?
Sure. So it'd be first, let's say you were using it for a staff person first and foremost. So first it would be the staff person in performing the core program function. So although as your consultant, most of the work goes to us, there's certain things that the town needs to do, post things on the website, answer questions from customers if they call, that sort of thing. That time would be covered. Similarly, you could use it for a staff person to provide more education about renewable energy. Separate from staff, you can use it to buy additional renewable energy if you would like for the program. There are also other ways of doing it, but that's one specific use. And then the one thing that people are most interested in, but the exact way this would work is part of what's being developed, is might use it to support a renewable energy project where the output of that project would go to the program. So that would be another possible use.
But that's in flux.
Correct. That's in flux. So
thank you.
That might be a case where if you were interested in it, and you might want to request the authorization to collect the funds, but if it turned out that wasn't available to you yet, you would have the option not to collect the funds until it became available.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Lisa, I think I saw your hand up, but then Laura.
So 2 questions then. Is this going to be specifically just for labor and not for materials that may do advertising for this program, or ask in the future if the general population of the town wants to use it for other things? And it's the first question. And the second would be, it's a lump sum that's given to the town, and then the town puts that into their employee, but then the taxes are taken out from the town level. So those are my.
Yeah, so 2 questions. So can you use it for, the first one, as I understand, is can you use it for just staff time or also materials? So the current rulings have been just for staff time, but I have a high degree of confidence that that's one area where towns will be given more flexibility. And if you wanted to use it for materials related to the program, I have a pretty high degree of confidence you would be able to do that yet. That's not, in stone yet, but I would think that would be possible. The way the funds come in is actually as electricity is used over the course of the program. So the town would get a check each month, or a payment each month from the electricity supplier for total amount of kilowatt hours sold through the program chart times your adder amount. What towns typically do, I'm not an expert in municipal finance. Tim and Diane would know much better than me, but typically towns create what I believe is called the revolving fund, a dedicated fund for the program, and the funds go in and then are spent out of that. It doesn't go into the town's general coffers. There's a dedicated account for it.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Laura?
I was just hoping you could clarify that third option again. I wasn't sure I followed that as closely. So there's the first option where we've got the cheapest option for Northborough. The second option is the 100% renewable. And then Mitch, I think you were describing a third option. Can you
So
say something
what
about
I know some towns do is they have three options of the cheapest,
Yep.
100% renewable, and then somewhere in the middle. And that's a good question, is how does that get figured out? Do we pick a number? Do we just average the least to the most? And then my proposal is, the way that I know other towns do it, is the default rate is that one in the middle.
Got it.
So the default might be 81% renewable, and then the user could switch, just like they could switch from one to the other. They could switch from one to either of the other. If their primary concern is saving money, they could switch to that. If their primary concern is renewables, they could switch to 100% renewables.
I like that option. Thank you.
And would it be helpful if I explain how, like, that decision making? So typically communities are not making that decision until after you get through the regulatory process and you see prices and you see how much that extra renewable energy costs.
Okay.
Then you can kind of say, all right, we got a price for that cheapest option,
Mhm.
you know, just the minimum renewable energy required by law. How much does it cost if we add 10% extra renewables or 20%? And we help you with that math. So that's typically the time when you're making that decision. And communities are frequently balancing this against some kind of framework that usually includes the basic service price as a guidepost. So maybe it's, we want to come in below the basic service price, add extra renewables, but be cheaper than the basic service price that's in effect at the time. Or it's, we want to add extra renewables, but we want to be about even with the basic service price. So typically those are the types of ways communities are thinking through that middle option.
Great. That's good to know. Thank you. Lisa, I think I saw your hand.
One other thought I had is now that we're looking to get the electric stations for the automobiles, and we haven't put any into my knowledge other than at Wegmans, but who purchases those? Who benefits besides the person for being able to get their car filled? Benefits from the cost of the electricity with those?
Don't think those are good questions. I don't think that relates to electricity aggregation.
Wouldn't we buy it from our aggregation though, if it was up to us?
The aggregation are for residential customers.
Residential, so it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to use it then for the municipal buildings?
Correct. Tim, you could, or Diane, you could probably best answer this. We already have an aggregation for municipal buildings that's been in place for a number of years. And that would be if we bought some town-owned EV chargers. I imagine the electricity would come through that plan.
Okay.
That's accurate.
Okay, great. Julianne.
Okay, so what if I'm a new homeowner in town? Does the whatever the previous homeowner had as their choices, does that transfer over, or do we start all over?
That's a great question. And it is super confusing. The participation in the program goes with the account. When a person moves out and a new person moves in, National Grid says, oh, it's a new account, there's a new account number, so they start over again. So that notice that I mentioned that goes out when the program launches that says you're going to be automatically enrolled, you have 30 days to decide if you don't want to participate, and here's the prices. That notice also gets mailed out on a rolling basis once the program's up and running to new electricity accounts that are opened in Northborough. And that balances the attrition that comes from people moving out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board? If not, sorry, Kristen.
All my questions were answered.
Okay,
So thank
great.
you.
I think we have a couple of decisions to make. One, the one we've talked about a bit is, do we want to have that operational adder in, which would trigger the start of, I guess, tomorrow's public input process? How does the board feel about having that? And again, I like the idea of give us the option, but make sure that that the option is in there from the start, and then we can decide the exact amount later. But if the common number to use is 1/10 of a cent, I think that's a reasonably good starting point. I don't want this to be a major source of funding, but I like the idea of it funding some additional sustainability efforts, which I think could be used to generate more benefit for the community than just the 1/10 of a cent alone. But Kristen.
I think that's a great idea, and it sounds like we need to get that, in the wording now. So let's just jump right in with that. I think it's a really good idea.
Great. Other board members' thoughts? Julianne?
So it will only be that we have the option once we get to, once DPU comes to us and says, now you have to make your final decisions, right? I mean, we don't have to decide what the percentage will be tonight. It's just an option. And could the option be no thanks at the end?
Yes, exactly right. So what you would be putting in the plan, so you would be putting in the plan that the town is authorized to collect an adder of up to 1/10 of 1 cent. You wouldn't be committed to doing so. You'd just be authorized to do it. And you would decide after the whole regulatory process, once you're looking at entering into electricity supply contract, we see how expensive aggregation the electricity supply is, you would make your decision at that point.
Well, I think public comment will help with that decision too. So, why not? I agree.
Laura, I'm seeing
I
nodding.
agree.
Okay,
Yeah,
Lisa, any comments on that?
I agree with everyone. I think it's a good.
Okay, great. And then the other item, and I know, Marlene, you were clear that we could decide later about the 2 versus 3 options. I would like the presentation materials that the public sees to reflect what we seem to be most interested in, understanding that we can change it later if need be. I've heard from 1 or 2 board members, in addition to myself, that like the 3-point approach. Do we have any initial thoughts on that?
Were you asking for our feedback?
For input from anyone, Kristen, then Laura.
So I already pestered my husband into getting 100% like green energy or whatever, and I make him, or he keeps changing who provides it and whatever, depending on the prices. So I would go for the 100%, and I hadn't thought about that, but what you mentioned, Mitch, how some residents might want kind of a happy medium. So I think that's a good idea. It's a good option to add in. I just hope it doesn't make it too much more confusing, but I don't think it will.
Laura?
I definitely agree already. I've made my points on that. I think for the flexibility, I don't want people to feel locked in something too high or too low based on their needs. And I think if we're going to have to default on it, that's a flexible option.
Okay, great. Tim, you have your electronic hand up. What's up?
Yeah, I'm just curious to know which one when we need to decide on the default out of those 3, if we were to choose the 3.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, Tim. And so the way the plan would need to read is you would need to decide now. So, or not now, you don't have to decide this second, but whenever you're making these decisions, you would need to decide. It would go in the plan. It would say, we're going to have 3 options, and this one is going to be the default. So along the lines of what other communities have done, as has been discussed today, you would say the default is the one in the middle that has some amount of additional renewables in it. That's the default. And then there are 2 options, one with 0 extra renewables that cost less, and one with more, maybe 100%, which would cost more. But you do need to pick which one of those is the default and say that in your plan.
Can we decide That option you said we don't have to decide today, but we decide, for example, at the end of the public comment period, which of the three?
I mean, just thinking for a second, because that
Yeah.
sounds like a good way to do it. It's not the way it's usually done. So I just want
Okay, so tell me how it's usually done.
Well,
'Cause I didn't
no,
understand
I'm not saying it was bad. I think it's actually a really good approach. It's just no one else thought of that before. So usually the way it's done, the plan is written that says, this is how we're planning to do it. The default
Okay.
is going to be the one in the middle, or whatever you decide, but this is going to be the default, and these two are going to be the options. I guess what I would recommend is that you would put that in the, say what you think you're going to do, put that in the plan, but invite comment on it. And if the comments
Okay.
change your mind and you want to change that, you would change that in response to the comments. But I would include
So that would be an item that is flexible that we could change without starting the process again.
Yes, in response to the comments, I think that would be a
Okay.
fair
Yep.
thing. But you would
Okay.
want to put a proposal in the plan that,
Yep.
we're
Okay.
planning to do it this way, but we'll be responsive to the comments.
Okay. Are folks okay with those three, with the middle one as the default for the purpose of gathering the public comment on that? Lisa?
Do we know what the financial difference is between the blend and the no renewable?
So I can give you a range or a sense of what it typically is. It's something you would decide about later once you see the prices, because I'll give you something more specific in a second. But what you'd be saying now in the plan is the default one is going to have some additional renewables in it. And we're going to decide once we see prices what some means, whether it's 1% extra or 50% extra. We can decide that later in response to actual prices. But it's common that that an additional something with 10% extra would cost. I'm trying to remember some math in my head. Give me a second and I'll think about some specific examples, or maybe Marlena, you have one that we just did recently for another community.
Not much different. Well, it depends on the price.
Yeah, so I'd say it would be on the range. It was typically on the range of, say, an extra cent in the tenth of an extra cent a kilowatt hour in the price for a typical customer, that would be on the order of like $5 a month extra.
Yeah, so yeah, maybe you add in an extra 10 or 20%, and it's maybe like a penny or so higher than the cheapest option. And then the 100% renewable one is maybe like a penny or so higher than that.
Right.
So you might be looking at, if we did this, it might be X dollars for the middle one. It might be $5 a month cheaper, or for the least expensive, and another $5 a month more for 100%. Roughly speaking, and I know that's going to vary year to year, month to month. Okay.
Yes,
That's a good question to at least have a rough sense ahead of time. But again, that final decision isn't made until after we know the exact dollars.
correct.
Okay.
Good question. Did I answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, good. I see a couple of questions up from the audience. Are folks ready for that, or does anyone else have any input at this time? Are we comfortable? Sorry, Diane, you have a question?
Yeah, I just, through the chair, I just wanted to ask Marlena if we have the three offerings as far as changing the plan. Is that something we would be able to do tomorrow? Updating the plan?
Yes, I think Paul, you and I we need to update the plan and all of the other files tomorrow.
Letters and everything, yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to do that all. It would have to all happen tomorrow.
Okay, I mean, we could make it a priority on our end as well. And that would start, that's when the comment period would start with all those updated files. Okay. Thank you.
Tim, your hand, I don't remember if it's still up or is it up again?
Yeah, it's up again. If I could just ask, and this is going down the road a ways relative to bidding, you know, do you guys recall, Paul or Marlena, anytime where the bid on the market has been so bad you've rejected them because they didn't compete with like the current rate for National Grid? And then so that's one, and the other is about timing after we get through DPU to go to the market. I don't want to give the community here and then the board a false expectation this is happening anytime soon, because I don't think it is. So I just want to cover those two pieces before we move on.
Yes. So on the prices, the town always had, before you've launched your program, when you're taking bids for the first time, you always have the option to reject all of them if you don't like the prices that you see, and if they're not attractive relative to the basic service price, you always have that option. It hasn't ever happened with us with the programs that we've done, where always in every case the town's been received bids that it was that it found acceptable, but it's your always option to say no, we don't find these acceptable. So you always have that choice. You know, and then in terms of timing, I think most realistically, we would probably be looking for an approval and to get the plan launched like November, December of this year, I think would be a reasonable target where we are today, counting on the regulators being faster than they have been in the past. And I think that's a good expectation, a reasonable expectation.
That's really good news to hear.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I can just follow up. If we were to launch, we go out to the market in November, December, and is it a January, February timeline for the new rate if we select one?
Yes, exactly right. So you do your trying to remember exactly when you do, whenever the National Grid winter price is announced, which I think they've just changed the schedule, so I'm not remembering exactly, but let's say around November. Would mean you would launch it in December, January, February, that time frame, because you need to build in time to send out the letter to everybody, give them 30 days to opt out or not, that kind of thing. There's a little bit of a lag there.
Thank you. That's all for me. Thank you.
Great. All right. We've got a couple of hands up from the audience in order that they were raised. I see Michael Tejan. Michael, if you could unmute, identify yourself, and let us know what's on your mind.
Yes, thank you. Hi, this is Mike Tejan, 30 Auger Ave. Just a question and comment on the default rate. I guess I'm unclear why the default rate would not be the cheaper rate. As a working family with 4 kids, you know, we use up a lot of power. You know, so I would hate for, you know, a family to get pushed into even, you know, anything higher because they maybe missed a couple of pieces of mail. And then on top of that, if you were, say, you missed the notices and you didn't make a selection and you're defaulted to a higher rate, how often can you change that? Is it like the energy providers now where there's a fee to do that? If that was covered earlier, I came on late, I apologize, but those are my two questions. Thanks.
I can take a stab at answering the question about changing program options. If you get defaulted into an option, or you just happen to choose an option that you're not comfortable with and you want to change that, you can change that at any time. There's no fee or penalty to move from one option to another within the program.
That's great. Okay, that's good. And as far as, you know, making the middle choice the default, I hear from a lot of residents that, you know, their primary interest is keeping the costs as low as possible. I also hear from a lot of residents who are very interested in renewables and helping the environment. So I think that's why a number of towns have done the 3 options with the default in the middle as sort of the basic starting point, and allowing a family to make a choice one direction or another if they so choose. But it sounds like we can make that choice. We should make sort of an educated best guess now, but based on public comment. If a lot of public comment comes in, pushing us in one direction or another, we could do that. And we could also, in theory, choose 100% renewables as the default rate. I'm not suggesting we do that, but if that might be appropriate in some communities. Thanks, Mike, for the comment. There was another hand up before. It has gone away. So I think I'm hearing support from the board on updating the materials to also include the 3 options with the middle as the default, and then reviewing when the public comment comes in.
Sure.
Julianne?
Do we have to pick the default tonight?
I think you said that we have to pick something tonight for the materials, and then based on if we get a lot of public comment for something else, we can use that public comment as justification to make a change in that item. Is that correct, Paul and Marlena?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Julianne?
Yeah, but I'm rethinking my support for the middle one now.
Okay. Any particular
Yeah,
concerns on that?
I do. I hear what Mike Tejan was saying, that maybe we should do the least expensive, and those who are concerned about renewable still have the option. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of the default in the middle, because it supports some of people who are most interested in cost and some of people who are most interested in renewables. Do you have customers that have that type of option?
Oh, we do, yes. We have many,
Yeah.
many communities in both camps. So some
Mhm.
with the least expensive as the default, and others who go with some extra renewables as the default. One thing I could add that a lot of communities who are wrestling with this decision think about, which is that you could make a decision that even if there's extra renewables in the default, you would only have as much so that it would still be less than the utility basic service. So
Mhm.
default might be more than the least thing, the lowest price you could charge, but still less than what people are paying now. You could adopt that as a policy direction, which would help some communities find the compromise that they're looking for, the middle ground they're looking for.
Okay. So I'll make up numbers just for the sake of trying to make sure that I understand this properly. Is, let's say the national grid rate is 15 cents. And we could do 13 cents as the cheapest. We could do 14.5 cents with additional renewables, and then 17 cents for 100%. We make the default the 14.5 cents. It's a little bit less than the national grid rate, but it might have 20% more renewables in there. That's roughly what you're getting at, correct?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Understanding I'm making up the numbers, but
that's it.
That's
Exactly.
the idea. Okay. Lisa.
What's the benefit to the renewals? What are the renewals?
Renewables. It's using additional renewable energy sources. So residents buy their electricity through this program. How is that electricity generated? What percentage of the electricity that they are buying is renewable, with the caveats that Marlena described in the presentation, that, how much is generated by, oil and gas plants versus solar and wind and other things. And, as the country moves more towards renewables, I believe that minimum actually increases every couple of years. And you said that it's now at 62%. So I imagine that will continue to climb slowly. But many people are, like Kristen, as an example, buys her electricity now as 100% from renewables. Pays a little bit more for that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, and I do maybe pay a little more attention to the bills from the electric company when I started understanding that electricity can be generated from, lots of different sources, and some of them are really bad for the planet. And so background info, I have an electric car. So, and it's an all electric car. So I have to charge, and I mostly charge the car at home in the little charger in the garage. So I use maybe more electricity, definitely more electricity than I did before I had that car. So I wanted to see, well, am I, still like helping the planet at all by having an electric car if the electricity I'm paying for is being generated by some nefarious, thing that pumps black smoke into this is what I'm picturing in my head. So I wanted to do the research and pick green energy, so I'm just more climate conscious.
Thank you.
Well, I'm kind of getting going on from Julianne is in terms of the original default, because there's some people who are just, the least amount is
Sure.
to pay.
There are absolutely there are, and there are absolutely people like Kristen that their default position is as much renewable as possible, and that's why I'm proposing something in the middle as recognizing both interests as valid. And if someone's interests are weighed in the extreme one way or the other, they have that option. And it sounds like they have that option to change at any time, which is great. I wasn't aware of that. I thought maybe you'd have to wait till the end of the contract period or something.
All right. So, but we could get general public comments before we actually made that decision of which one.
Okay. I see a couple of hands up in the audience. I'm going to recognize them, and then hopefully we can start to wrap up this conversation and move along. I see just the last name Sui. I assume that's Dick. If you could unmute yourself, identify yourself, let us know what's on your mind, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
We do.
Okay, yeah, so it's Dick Swee, 230 Brewer Street. So my only comment was this process seems to get overly complicated. The major objective here is to come up with the lowest price electricity. I know people are talking about renewables, but the motivation here was to get cheap prices. This whole process started years ago, and we're still at the point of looking like we're starting out. At the time that this came up and was approved by the town, Westboro was paying 10 cents kilowatt hour, and Northborough was paying 33 cents a kilowatt hour. So my only concern is that in this discussion, Mitch, you brought up adding other options, that we're complicating this thing and we're losing the focus. The focus is to get cheap electricity costs, and the hope is that it gets generated in the best way. But my concern is by adding more complications, we're going to make this thing go out even further. It's already gone out years, and the extra complications are going to make the negotiations result in 3 options, with the lowest option being higher than it would have been had we all focused on what I think is the main motivation, which is getting the electricity price cheaper. We have an all-electric home, which used to be an advantage, and maybe it will be someday, but we have bills that can range up to $1,500 to $2,000 a month. So when you talk about adding a little bit more cost per kilowatt hour, it means a lot of money. So I would say, let's not lose the focus. So the motto here is keep it cheap and get this done quick. We're already losing a lot of money. Everybody's losing money. And also, I think we're making the town uncompetitive from business point of view, because businesses would benefit from the lower price as well. I would think that would attract more businesses to the town. Right now, it's basically a tax, because if you're opening a business, you might as well go to Westboro or Southboro, where they have cheaper electric prices, and save the money. So keep it cheap. I would oppose adding more options. Let's just get this done, and let's get it done cheap and quick. Okay, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Dick. A quick question on that. Can businesses take advantage of this, or is this strictly for residents?
I'm sorry, it's available to anyone in the town.
Oh,
Residents.
okay. Oh, good. Somehow I thought it was residential only. So that's good. And yeah, obviously cost is a driving factor in why you would do this, whether it be the lowest possible cost no matter what, or the lowest possible cost that also gets you more renewable electricity. That that variation varies family by family, but cost is the driving factor in all this. And my understanding is making these changes now really doesn't slow us down at all. And we're not inventing something new out of whole cloth. We're talking about things that many other towns have done, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's see. Dick, I'm going to lower your hand because I don't think we did before, but if you have additional questions, feel free to chime in. Jay Cahill, I assume, Gene, I'm going to bring you in to answer or ask your question.
Yes, thanks. Jean Cahill, One Thayer Street. I just wanted to point out that new renewable sources are actually coming online cheaper. And that's why the renewable sector is growing faster in this country than conventional energy sources. So it's not necessarily sacrificing price. It may actually be in our price interest to be increasing the rate at which we are putting renewables into our town supply.
That's great. Thank you, Gene. That's a good point. I mean, the faster at the rate that we as just an overall large community use renewables, the more that will come online, and that's better for everybody. Okay, so on the three, how do we feel? Are we comfortable with the presentation now being updated with three with the default in the middle? Again, based on public comment, that's something we have a lot of flexibility to change. We just need to know what the presentation materials need to look at as of tomorrow.
Let's just pick one and then move on from this.
Yeah.
Because we have a long list of things to talk about. And
Yeah.
like you said, we can change this.
Yeah.
Like if a lot of people let us know this is not okay, then great. Thank you for the input. We'll
Yeah.
change it. So
Yeah.
I say for right now, we put it at that middle one.
Okay. Folks okay with that? Julianne? No.
No, I want the cheapest one. And I completely would like, to have as much renewable energy as possible, but I just think that for too many people, it's going to be the bottom line cost, and I appreciate that, and therefore I want the cheap one. As
Laura?
people,
I think at this point, based on Mike's feedback and being price sensitive, my preference would be for the default to be the cheaper option. I understand the benefit of the middle of the road, but if we do need to save money, I think that I'd like to go that route. And at the end of public comment, if it seems like the default will be better in the middle, I would totally support that, but I don't want to adversely financially affect anyone when we're trying to do this. And I think Mr. Sweet for those comments as well.
Okay, Lisa?
I agree with the girls. I think I would go with the least expensive, and then if the general population wants to change it, I'd go with on what they want.
But still, the three of you are still interested in having three options as opposed to the two, but the least expensive being the default for the presentation materials. Okay.
Please.
All right. So I think that's our decision. Thank you for everybody for hearing me out on this. Any other comments or questions on the aggregation process, or is there anything else, Marlene or Paul, that we need to do tonight?
I don't think so.
I
Okay.
think what we need to do is clear from here.
Okay.
We'll take care of this tomorrow.
Very good. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Diane?
I wanted to thank Marlena and Paul very much. And like I said, this will be a priority and we'll be in touch in the morning. I appreciate your help.
Okay.
We'll be in touch if there's power, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny.
Yeah, speaking of electricity, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much
you.
for joining us tonight.
Thank you
This has
very
been
much.
great.
Bye.
Great. Thank you very much. Moving along with our agenda, next up we have Fire Chief David Parenti on request of approval of ambulance fee adjustments. Bring in the chief.
Good afternoon, or good evening, I should say.
Good evening. How are you?
Wonderful, yourselves?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. All right. So some ambulance fee changes. Give us the rundown if you could.
Sure. So back in 2017, 2018, I was reviewing our ambulance fees, and they hadn't been touched at the time. So we had gone through, made some radical changes. Our billing, we made some increase. And at that time, we discussed coming back every 2 to 3 years to look at what Medicare or Medicaid has done and what our costs have done. Have they escalated? Have they gone down? And then make adjustments based on whatever we time. So in December of this year, I started doing that review, or December of last year, I apologize. I started doing that review and submitted a memo to the board with my recommendations, which was based on an increase of 4.78% Medicare Medicaid, that we should increase our fees. Now, our costs are actually going up closer to 10%. The purpose of the fees is not to make money. The purpose of the fees is to offset and control it. This does it. Thus,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Chief. Are other people having trouble with the microphone dropping out? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Get closer, does it help?
We'll find out as you speak.
Probably not, because I have a crappy signal here. So I apologize. I did the assessment. Our increase in what it's costing us per run is up about 10%. My recommendation is to increase our fees about 4.78%. And my reasoning for that is we're not in the business to make money. That's not why we're doing it. Not why I'm recommending that we increase. Yes, we increase our fees to help offset charging taxes to provide advanced life support. One of the big problems we have is our payer makeup. What a payer makeup is how many of your payers have private insurance? How many of your payers have Medicare, Medicaid insurance? How many of them have no insurance? Medicaid, Medicare has a very, very low, what's called an allowable. Their allowable is around $475. It cost us significantly more than that to do an EMS. So what we do is, and what all the communities I've worked for before do, is we analyze what our costs are. We determine how much we take Medicaid at a certain percentage to that. I'm sorry, Medicare at a certain percentage to that. That's what our fees were. And then we develop a very robust billing policy. Now, have you all seen our billing policy and how it works? I think I copied it to you, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was in the agenda packet.
Okay, so the important concept with that is we don't balance bill Northborough residents except under two specific circumstances. If a Northborough resident has no insurance, even though they're supposed to under the law, if they have no insurance and they can't pay, they don't get balance billed. So they don't get billed. We write that off. If they do have insurance, but they choose to have a very high deductible, some people choose $10,000 deductible. What happens is we don't get any money. They have much cheaper insurance, and the people who are taking normal deductibles are bearing the extra cost of providing the service. So in that case, we do balance bill those people. And then the other case is if an insurance company pays the patient directly. Insurance companies for a while got into a policy of paying their people directly, and then as a patient, you get a check for $2,000. You just keep it. You don't pay us. So those people we also balance. No other town residents balance. So my recommendation is a moderate increase of 4.78%. And although it doesn't cover our increased fees, I do think it's reasonable. I did put some frequently asked questions on the end of my memo to you, because one of the things I always get asked is, what's everyone else doing? Well, our billing agent, and we use a company, Comstar, sends us, this is what my top 50 providers bill. We're underneath all 50. So I think we're well within what we're asking for. The money goes right into our revolving account, helps offset, pay for our ambulances, helps offset our overtime, and help offset what we,
Okay, thanks, Chief. Any questions from the board? Laura?
So I was doing my best to understand. So I'm just to clarify, we're adjusting the rate to accommodate money that's not currently covered by insurance. How is that paid for now? When, like, if somebody has that $800 max and they can't afford the additional cost for that ambulance visit, what happens? Like, who pays for that?
Sure. So what you do, and so does everyone else that pays their taxes. Happens is, let's say if they're not a town resident. If they're a town resident, it gets written off. Let's say they're not a town resident, they live in Westboro, and we bill them, and their max is they can pay is 800. Or if they are a town resident and they have a situation where they can't afford to pay on their balance bill, they can submit a waiver. They submit through our billing agent a request for a hardship. That hardship comes to me. That hardship is based, our approval of that hardship is based on state approval numbers for what they bid on, what they use for giving out assistance. I would say 99% of the time that waiver is granted. If it's not granted, and it's my decision, I make all the decisions. Not granted, it's normally offered at can you pay $10 a week? Can you pay $10 a month? And if they say, no, we can't pay anything at all, we review it. And most of the time those don't get the money.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Is that included when they get ambulance bills?
That is the ambulance.
I'm sorry, but the steps, like if somebody, like, let's say we do approve this rate increase and let's say a resident can't afford it, do they have to know that this exists, or is it written when they get the ambulance bill?
All part of their billing. When they get their bill, if you have an issue, if you can test the bill, do this. If you have a problem and you want to ask for a hardship, apply the hardship this way, and then the hardship between me and my admin, no one else sees them. So if someone says, hey, I can't afford this because I got laid off or whatever it happens to be, don't know who sees them or myself and my admin and make the decisions.
And then I've got one other question. With all of the great stats that you've got, how many people do you think this will impact if we make this change? Do we have any thoughts?
How many people? It really won't impact the people at all. What it impacts is the insurance companies. So the insurance companies also set they determine to be allowable. Okay. And if they're allowable they base their allowables on Medicare, Medicaid as well. Their allowable is what we bill, they pay it. Their allowable is below what we bill, they'll pay what their allowable is. And if the person is a resident in town, it doesn't affect them at all. The resident, if it's someone who's not a resident of town, they get balanced billed, but they always have the option of saying, I have a hardship, I can't pay the. Or to be honest with you, what most people do, Laura, is they just ignore us. They do nothing. They don't pay the bill. We don't take people to court. We send it to we do have a company that does collections. Send it to a collection agency. They try a certain amount of time and then they say, this is a lost cause. We can't do anything. We're writing.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Oh, certainly.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Okay. I don't have any questions myself. I think we prepared makes sense, as simple. Unfortunately, the motion is not simple, but I will ask for that complicated motion.
I will be happy to read that complicated motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I move the board vote to increase the ambulance fees effective March 1st, 2024, as presented by Fire Chief Parenti and further outlined in a memorandum dated January 19th, 2024, as follows. BLS emergency base rate from 1,398 to 1,465, ALS non-emergency base rate from 1,048 to 1,098. ALS 1 emergency base rate from 1,660 to 1,739. ALS 2 emergency base rate from 2,402 to 2,517. And then mileage from 35 to 36.
Second.
Okay, motion's made by Kristen, seconded by Laura. Any other discussion? All those in favor, Kristen,
Aye.
Laura,
Aye.
Lisa. Oh, Lisa's muted.
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. You have your new rates. Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate your
Thank you
time.
very much. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. You too. Okay. Next up, we have Town Clerk Andrew Dowd, request for ARPA funding for electronic voting devices for town meeting. Bring in Andy. Andy, welcome back.
Good evening. Thanks for having me back. Mr. Chair, members of the board, as you recall, last month I came before the board at the January 22nd meeting, presented you information regarding electronic voting systems that could be used for counting the votes at town meeting. We had a vendor kind enough to make a presentation that night at a very late hour, but he stuck with us. And the board gave consensus that evening that they had a desire for the town to obtain such an electronic voting system. So tonight I'm back requesting funding for the purchase of that system. The system that we've chosen has a cost of $16,425. We would own 500 units. There is an optional annual support fee that covers certain things that we will probably incorporate into the operating budget yearly. Just to give you a bit of background of the process we followed, staff reviewed proposals from, we had 3 vendors that provided information and gave us that information, and we followed the standard procurement process for that. After reviewing those, we're recommending that the purchase be done for the Meridia voting system, which is M-Vote, and actually happens to be the product that was demonstrated that evening. Their system is utilized in many communities in Massachusetts, including some of our neighboring towns. And that's important because there is the ability to share the communities, the devices between communities. If we needed additional, if we expect a very large attendance at our meeting in advance, we could make arrangements with the community of Southborough, who has just done a similar purchase, or one of the other neighboring communities that have devices that could be borrowed. So that's definitely a benefit of utilizing their system. And it's important to note that if the funding is granted tonight, we would have the system in place for this year's annual town meeting beginning April 22nd. And the vendor does offer full on-site support for that first event, which is important to get us all up to speed on the operation. So that's why I'm here, happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions? Lisa?
To confirm, I asked Andy earlier, but these units would be coming with their lanyards. And it said something about, does it have a town logo on it, or is the logo of the company on it?
So the units will come with a lanyard. So basically you could hang it around your neck if you wish to keep track of it throughout the night. And they also come with sleeves, which basically act as a protective cover for the device. There is an option you may have seen on the quote to place a logo, which could be the town's logo, but that would actually go on the plastic device itself and would be covered by the protective sleeve. So honestly, I don't see the point in spending the money on a logo that wouldn't be visible, but we could certainly add that if you think the extra $500 is worthy of that expense.
No, I was just wondering if it was included. I wouldn't add to it, but
it's an optional fee.
Laura?
Thank you for that. so if we were like, how would you know our devices versus Southborough's if we were sharing them for whatever reason?
It's a good question. So all of the devices that we purchase will be numbered. And the vendor has specifically addressed that where we have this potential to share amongst towns, we would want to purchase devices that are numbered differently from those in our contiguous communities that we may choose to borrow from in the future. Because the system would not allow two devices that are numbered the same to be utilized at the same meeting. All the numbers would have numbers in a system in the background that are assigned to each. And that's part of the many factors of security behind the system on how they maintain it. So that's how that would work.
Thank you. And I'm happy that this is on our agenda today. And I know that there's been a lot of feedback from the community about this. So I hope it'll get more people to attend town meeting out of curiosity and excitement. As a board, will we be using the clickers, or will we still be raising our vote? Will we still get voting cards and vote the way that we have in the past?
I'm sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble understanding you, but I believe you said, could the board utilize it or another board? Is that your question?
No, I think that as a select board, will we still use our cards, or will we have to use the clickers?
I see. No, everyone that's a registered voter and checks in would be using the device to vote, including board members.
Huh. That's really curious. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kristen.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for this. So if we, I think we talked about at our last meeting that it was an option. Some towns just use them for really contentious votes, or really like the 2/3 votes, I think, or the really close votes. Did you and the moderator or anybody talk about how we'll do that, or is that still up in the air? I'm just curious.
We did have conversation, and I've had, further conversation with the moderator, Fred George, since our last meeting in January. Really, that's his call because it's his meeting. He's responsible for everything that happens there. I know Southborough has indicated that they probably will not utilize the system for every article, but that's something we'll have to decide on, before the meeting. Personally, and obviously this will be decided between him and I and many other probably folks that have input. I think for the first round, it would make sense to utilize it for all the votes, just to get people accustomed to it through a whole meeting. And it also provides the benefit of seeing the warrant articles, the text displayed on the screen as part of each vote. There's some other benefits to utilizing it for every vote, even though it can slow things down a bit. If you had a very quick article, for example, a motion to pass over, we don't have any prior year's bills, that may be quicker ultimately with a quick raise of hands, raise of cards. But the extra few seconds or a minute that it takes to utilize the clickers is probably worthwhile for the first event. But the moderator and I will have that discussion and come up with a plan prior to the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Any other comments? Or let's say Lisa and then Julianne.
If we want to be able to use it for our surveys, like they've talked about, hey, you can use it for other things besides a town meeting. Would we have the option? I mean, how soon are these going to come in? And would we have the option, and would they work with us for the first time around to do it for a survey situation?
The units can be used for other purposes in the community. They would have to be used at an in-person event. If you had a large community forum, for example, and you wanted to quickly gauge interest on a particular question, you could have the units available that night and distribute them to attendees and ask them to simply indicate by, the vote on the screen, yes or no, their interest level or their preference to a certain option, maybe on a project, that sort of thing. I expect we'll have the units that they'll be here well before town meeting. I wouldn't anticipate using them prior to town meeting. There's a bit involvement in the background to get the system set up and running for use. And I think having staff on site for that first event is going to be important for all of us to get up to speed on that. But certainly going forward, if there's a community event where they would be able to be used, it would make a lot of sense to utilize them for that as well.
Okay, great. And I just want to say, Laura, I agree with you. This is wonderful. I think we'll have more attendance. But I also want to give some kudos to Joanne Stockland for starting this ball rolling last year. And I think she did a great job in piquing our interest in coming into the new world. So thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
Okay, Julianne?
Well, I would also like to remind us that Amy Paresky did send an email today. She did an informal poll on a couple of Facebook pages, and the numbers that she calculated were that 106 people are in favor of this, and 18 against. So I think we have substantial community support to move ahead with this.
I'll just add, if I may, that, you know, for many years, I've seen demonstrations of these products and talked to my colleagues across the state. And we've had discussion in the background amongst staff. And I'm glad this finally came forward as an item that the board is interested in seeing utilized. And it certainly, I think, will provide added confidence to those attending the meeting that the votes are counted correctly, although I'm certain that they always have been. I understand the methods that we use is old school because town meeting in itself is a very old method that's utilized throughout New England, as I think I touched on at the last meeting. But in any event, this will, I think this will be a good thing for all involved, including myself. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Thank you. Quick question. You had mentioned in your memo that you would be getting some assistance, obviously, from the company that's providing these for town meeting. Would they be somebody be in person at the meeting?
Yep, great. It'll be full in person for the first event. So
that's fantastic.
It is.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to approve the use of ARPA funds in the amount of $16,425 for the purchase of an electronic voting system for use at town meetings and for expenditure of such sum by the town clerk pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A.
Second.
Let's see. Motion made by Julianne, seconded, I think, by Kristen. If not by everybody else, which is great. Any other discussion? All those in favor, Julianne?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andy, for doing all the work in getting ready for this, and good luck with the rest of the preparations for town meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate your support.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Okay,
Can I just add one more little note, Mitch?
Yeah.
Just want to call out Julianne Hirsch, who also has been cheering for these electronic clickers for a long time. I think since before you were on the board, and getting not much support from that current board. So I'm really glad that the town is behind this, and that we are doing what the town seems to be interested in. So
thank you.
Yes. Yeah, this is
Hey,
good.
can I ask a question here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does Andy have to wait until we do the warrant?
The election warrant. Is Andy needed for the election warrant item? Andy is no longer on the meeting. So I assume he does not need to be here for the election warrant. But you're right. It would have made sense for the agenda to be ordered that way, for him to be there if there were any questions.
Okay.
Tim, I assume we don't need Andy then for the election warrant item.
No, it's straightforward. I mean, there's no options for the board except to sign.
Yeah. Okay. Good question, Julianne. All right. So next up on our agenda is discussion regarding the duties of the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. I'm going to bring in Megan Robbins from the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee into our meeting. Megan, if you can, when you get in here, unmute, turn on your camera if you so desire. I'll give a little bit of background to this. Is the traditional way that the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee has functioned is the committee would meet for one meeting, a couple weeks in advance of town meeting, give a quick review of all bylaw creations and amendments, zoning, general bylaws, etc., and in that meeting decide up or down as to whether they were recommending or not recommending those articles. And then at town meeting, the moderator would ask whoever was representing the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee at the meeting for how they viewed. I was one of those people once. I chaired the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee before joining the Select Board for 1 year, which meant one meeting. And it was an awkward situation being in it because I felt that we were making some rather significant recommendations with not a lot of discussion. And in one case, there was some information that we got at our one meeting that turned out to be incorrect, that I think would have changed the recommendation of the board. And that's not a fault of the person that provided the information. It was the best information that was available. And last year, there was also a lot of discussion about that. So in looking at the bylaw, it makes clear that the Select Board has policy oversight over the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee, and the town administrator has administrative oversight. So, we had discussed right after town meeting, hey, we should really have a discussion on what that would look like. I thought it was best to wait until we had a town administrator in place and an assistant town administrator in place, given that traditionally the assistant has been the person that's interfaced with the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. And as to Megan being here, Megan is a member of the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. Apparently at their single meeting last year, they did not choose a chair. But Megan drew the short straw, or whatever it was, that you were the only member that was available to attend town meeting. So you were the one who gave the recommendations at town meeting. So that's why I reached out to you in advance of this discussion. And I know you're traveling, and I really appreciate you making time available to join us tonight. So briefly, I think everybody probably has a copy at this point of the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee bylaw from the town website. And I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, not that it's very long, but I'll read really just one sentence that is really the charge of that committee. The committee shall organize the municipal code as to form, maintain said code in current form, advise the town meeting as to new bylaws, and annually report recommendations for future legislation to the Board of Selectmen, which of course is now Select Board. And so one of the questions that came up after last year was, hey, the bylaw says that the committee should make recommendations on new bylaws, where most of our articles relating to bylaws are amendments. And so I think that is one policy item for us to discuss as to, how do we want to clarify that, if at all, for the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. And then there are those other tasks of organizing the code and annually making recommendations for future legislation that, at least in my time involved in Northborough government, has not taken place, and certainly didn't happen when I was on that committee. And Diane, I think you had told me that when you and I discussed this, that you've been here, of course, a while, and you don't recall the committee participating in those efforts, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Megan, I know you've only been on the committee, similar to my experience, 1 year, which means one meeting. So I didn't know if you had anything else that you wanted to offer at this time, and then we'd open up to the board for us to sort of figure out what to do.
I don't have much to offer besides the thought that there do seem to be some potholes that are missing as to the committee's duties and functions. And last year at the meeting, the first and only meeting that I was at, besides town meeting, I really did feel like I was rushed. I did what I was told to do. I showed up, I gave my essentially we voted on our recommendations, And I do think that it is needed, that there is some more backing to this committee. I think it's very important, and I think the advisement from the select board would be very, very helpful.
And I want to make clear that I have no fault at all in any member current or prior to the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. I think there has been, for whatever reason, the tradition of how this committee operates just has been a tradition, and how it originated, none of us know. And I think it's just apparent we should at least clarify what those roles are, and I think that would probably be helpful to the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee as well as town meeting. And
I agree to that.
and those other tasks, I would love for the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee to get involved. The recodification is something that we are well overdue on. It's been discussed here and there. I think we're supposed to do it every 10 years, and it's been a lot more than 10 years since the town recodified the bylaws. And making periodic recommendations to us on bylaws we may want to consider is also something I think it would be great to have a committee sort of review, towns in the area or towns across the state, and some of the things that they are doing to improve their communities, and things that might be presented to us. The last thing I'll mention is, I think we all saw an email today from a member of the planning board drawing a question as to should the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee make recommendations on zoning related bylaws, whether they be amendments if we want them to do that, or just new bylaws. That's something I hadn't thought about that until then. Obviously, all zoning bylaws go by law through the planning board. The bylaw creating the bylaw committee does not weigh in on that either way. But I thought it's an interesting question that was raised, that I wanted to bring that up also. With that, I would love to hear from members of the board as to any thoughts, questions, anything like that. Lisa.
A couple of different things. First off, it's a 5-member board. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yes. As of last May, we had a full board.
Okay, so you still have the full board coming into the next April?
Yes. Yes.
And I just in reading what we received today in the email about the planning, I think we've agreed that they will not be working on zoning bylaws because of what the planning board has to go through in order to have public comment and all of that.
Well, we haven't agreed on anything. So the purpose of this agenda item is for the select board to give that direction of whatever we as a board feel that the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee should be working on within the bounds of the bylaw. To me, it's gray as to whether they should or should not be working on zoning related items. I can see it either way because it's unclear in the bylaw committee bylaw.
All right, because it says here, per Mass General Law 48, Section 5, no vote to adopt any such proposed ordinance or bylaw or amendment thereto shall be taken until a report with the recommendations by a planning board has been submitted to the town meeting or city council, or 21 days after the hearing has elapsed without submission of such a report. There's other things in here that she's talking to law, and I think that I would agree with that. That I would feel more comfortable, since they put an awful lot of time and energy into putting their zoning bylaws together, and then they've even asked for ZBA to kind of give a thought. I think that they've covered their stuff pretty well. And what I'd love to see is that Megan not be there by herself again, but that the board would attend, the entire board would attend the meeting. I think that especially when you're up there and you have to stand up there and say, okay, this is what the board has decided, you should have your full support of your board. And I hope that happens. We appreciate what you're doing, and it's not an easy task getting up there and speaking, as I well know. And I would like to I don't know if we can have that, Mitch. I don't know if that's something that is a sort of a requirement, but that I would like
that the full committee attend. I don't think we can practically require any committee to be in full attendance, because what happens if one member has other plans or is sick or anything else? I think I would certainly encourage full attendance from any board that has an important role in town meeting. And so, but I don't think we can by policy require that, because then what happens if that doesn't come true?
All right. Well, I think it bears a, remark every year that we hope we see everybody.
Yeah.
And then to go into the recodification and the the whole charter, I think that we should have a separate charter commission put together so that all of that is considered. And then, once we've got what we've done, I suppose the bylaw, this committee could weigh in on it. So how that's been put together, but I would feel that normally you put a full committee together based on a number of different people to work on that charter.
Well, charter commission is a completely different thing than a municipal code and bylaw committee, and is separate from the duties. Recodification is, Tim, you could certainly explain it better than I could, but it's basically looking at all of our bylaws, checking to see, okay, does bylaw number 4 refer to bylaw number 6, but it turns out that we've inserted another one, so that should actually refer to bylaw number 7, or does it, does it reference a particular state law that has changed that maybe we need to update the bylaw for that purpose? Or in one case that, updating all of the language throughout our bylaws that say, where it says Board of Selectmen, replace them with Select Board. That's recodification. Recodification really doesn't change the intent of anything. Where a charter commission is, what do we want to make drastic changes to our core governing documents, which is a different thing entirely.
All right. Well, I would think that might be something to look at too, because that chart hasn't been changed at all in how many years?
97.
To that question.
Okay. Thanks. Laura.
I'm just going to piggyback off of what Lisa said. I think in the research that I've done in the past about recodification is that was done by a specific committee, because it is one thing that's done every, I think on our charter, I think it's every 5 years. I think, it's overdue. So that would be my preference there. Megan, I'm so grateful for all you've done for the committee. And I realize you've been put in a really awkward position, and I am sorry about that, because town meeting is a big deal. And I felt really bad when you really got put on the spot last year, because it was hard. You've got one meeting. I'm disappointed, and it's nothing towards you or the volunteers, but I'm disappointed that there wasn't more frequent meetings leading up to it. I think it's confusing to the public when we've got, the select board and the planning board and all these other boards proposing bylaws. And then we've got the municipal code and bylaw committee speaking up, in opposition to it. It's confusing. So I'd love it if we could get that process a little bit more ironed out. I was confused, Mitch, because on the website, it says that the municipal code and bylaw committee is appointed by the moderator, but on the bylaw, it says it's under the code of the selectmen. So I think we need to clarify that language as well. Who is the appointing authority for the committee?
It is the moderator. So in part A of the bylaw, it says the moderator shall appoint each member.
Okay.
The select board has the policy oversight of it. It says specifically, the municipal code and bylaw committee shall work under the general policy direction of the Board of Selectmen and the general administrative direction of the administrative officer.
Okay. So when we're talking about the policy, then are we going to talk about the meeting frequency? Are we going to talk about the expectations of the committee and really ironing out that language? Like what type of policy?
Yeah, I think, at this point, the high level items are, what type of bylaws do they review? Do they review new bylaws only, or new and amended bylaws? From my reading, it only says new in the bylaw. So I think from my perspective, that's what they do. And do they review general bylaws or general bylaws and zoning bylaws?
Okay. Should I make my comments on those factors?
Sure.
Okay. So my preference would be that any of these, decisions or comments on those factors, we need to increase the meeting frequency. And like Lisa said, work with the boards that are making these proposals so that we fully understand the nature and the heart of the bylaw. And we've got to have a more unified message when we bring it to town meeting. And, I think those public hearings are a great opportunity for everybody to really vet out their questions. And that would be a great opportunity just to have that really solid answer. So I guess I'm up in the air about the type of bylaws. It's really going to come down to how well that committee is going to work with the other committees that are making the articles for town meeting.
Okay.
And
yeah. I want to follow up on something you said, Laura, because I didn't quite understand it. The recodification. Are you
separate
suggesting
topic.
that a separate committee?
Yeah.
But this bylaw, in my reading of it, makes it clear that it has to be this committee.
Right.
That it says the committee shall organize the municipal code as to form and maintain said code in current form. So that is essentially the definition of recodification. Again, recodification is more of an administrative task. Mechanically, it is always done by an outside firm. So an outside firm is hired to go through. It's an attorney who specializes in municipal bylaws and understands state law and goes through, and it's that person or that organization makes a whole bunch of change marks to the document. Not changing the intent of anything, but making sure that everything is current as to law and proper, and one item matches another item. And who does that person or group then work with through the process? And I think the bylaw requires it to be the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. Those are not recommendations on changing something. That's not saying, for example, we should or shouldn't have a plastic bag ban, or particular setbacks on properties or anything like that. None of those changes are done in recodifications. Tim, I assume you've been through recodifications before.
I have, yes, you're right.
Okay.
I guess then when the recodification comes about, I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on this, because when I've seen it, I've read about it done in a variety of different ways, but the people that are presenting these bylaws have, experience, and they've gone to classes, and they've really done a lot of studying on those topics. And we don't have those same requirements for the people that are on the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee. And so that it's just.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, the important thing to iron out tonight is any work that needs to take place in advance of town meeting in April, which is, it's just over 2 months away. We're not going to be doing any recodification between now and then.
Correct. Okay,
Yeah.
so we can put that aside.
Correct. I agree with that. Megan, did you have something to add?
No, just only that the makeup of the committee has been has become somewhat more robust. Our two members that just joined are both practicing lawyers. Although I'm not a lawyer, I do have a master's in public policy, so I have a background there. So we have gotten that more experience in, if that makes you feel any more comfortable.
I think I don't know how we're going to solve this, is the meeting frequency. Just meeting once before town meeting that's the toughest one for me. We've got lots of committees meeting on a really regular basis and devoting so much time. It's just hard. And I think you've even recognized it yourself. So I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound.
Yeah, I mean, that's
how do we change that part?
That's what we were given. I don't know, I guess it's up to you guys to make those decisions. That's not up to me. That's just kind of what happens last year. And it definitely would and should need to change going forward. Yeah.
And it's not just, this is like the past 4 or 5 years that this has happened. So it's definitely It's not you.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
I,
this isn't a new issue. I think it's just
Yeah.
new that we're trying to improve it. Just broadly speaking, a lot of these bylaws, particularly the zoning bylaws, take many months to years of planning board work to prepare. So I think it is any body that is making recommendations on those needs to take the time to fully understand and have the opportunity for Q&A and back and forth before making a recommendation, if in fact it is the decision of this board that they make those recommendations. Kristen.
So I just wanted to get back to the phrase advise the town meeting as to new bylaws in the the part that you bolded in the what the Muni Code and Bylaw committee does. So you're right, it is gray. We have to decide. That means we have to decide.
Yeah.
So as far as should they do new zoning bylaws, my I would, okay, so let me just double check. So the ZBA goes over all the new zoning bylaws, right? Don't they?
It's primarily driven by the planning board with input from
No,
the
no,
zoning
I know,
Yeah.
sorry. I know it's the planning board is really the body in charge of new zoning bylaws, but they run them by the ZBA also, right?
Yes.
And then the ZBA says we do or don't approve, right? Okay. And then the planning board also runs it all by, well, obviously the town planner is heavily involved. And then the council. And we just recently, in the last few months, made the planning board have a specific land use council, correct? So would that be the council who's reading any new bylaws that they're proposing?
Yeah, I mean, council's job is not to recommend up or down, but to make sure that things are written legally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So they're not recommending, but they're for sure making sure they're legal. So that's all the people in charge of all that. That's all above my position here on the select board. Having watched many planning board meetings, I'm really not up to snuff with what they do. And I'm very uncomfortable saying this other group should be also making recommendations on specifically zoning bylaws, especially since it looks like we can choose which way to do it. I think the people who have a lot of expertise in zoning are all covered there. And it's not like it's one or two people making these decisions. It's already a lot of people making recommendations. And there are other things, lots of other things, it sounds like, that this lovely group of the Muni Code and Bylaw Committee would do. This is not a committee, Megan, that I could ever be on. So thank you very much for volunteering your time. It's just like it turns my brain to mashed potatoes, the kinds of things that you guys have to consider. So I really appreciate that. But since there are a lot of things, the recodification down the road, but also just in preparing for town meeting, if we want to change how things are done, if we want them to have meetings with other groups. I don't know, are we going to have new bylaws this year that aren't in zoning that they're going to have to be reviewing?
So I asked earlier, Tim, Diane, and also Lori Connors, and it sounds like there's only one new bylaw this year, and it's a zoning bylaw. I suspect some amount of that has to do with the fact that we haven't had a town administrator for the bulk of this past year. So, conceivably, general bylaws that might have been proposed and gone through that process haven't been.
Okay. So I would still lean towards saying no zoning, having them not review the zoning or not have to approve the zoning bylaws, because it did become contentious last year, and it seemed unnecessarily it drove a wedge in the town meeting, I felt like. And there's no need for that if we already have all the zoning people reading everything. Like the fact that the ZBA is sort of the planning board's other, you know, other not other half, but they're doing similar stuff and they're reviewing any zoning laws. I just feel like this is superfluous. And I feel like it can create a wedge in the town that we don't need that at town meeting. Like we can make our own wedges. We have plenty of things to disagree about. So, and then it puts those people in such a terrible situation. So I don't know. I would say let's simplify. Let's just simplify it and say have them not do the zoning. And this year is a great building year then to figure out what's the best use of these great volunteers' time. And it sounds like we've got some really fantastic people on it now. Awesome. Thank you, Megan.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Kristen, for clarifying. Laura.
I was going to concur with Kristen on that. And if part of the policy is like meeting frequency, can we talk about that, or would that be a committee-based decision?
I wonder if that's more administrative,
okay.
Which is under the direction of Tim as the administrative officer. Traditionally, that's been delegated to the assistant town administrator as far as overseeing and scheduling these meetings. My suspicion is that, if we're agreeing that this committee deals with general bylaws but not zoning bylaws and new bylaws but not amendments, that would mean that they have no recommendations to prepare for this year's annual town meeting, and then we can defer any other such questions as to how they operate in that regard, that we don't have to decide any of those things now anyway.
I guess the part of the purview though that talks about future legislation to the Board of Selectmen, like looking forward, that would be something that we should look.
Yeah, my hope is then Tim and or Diane would schedule a meeting of the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee sometime in the near future, before town meeting, after town meeting. I would leave that up to them to start to work on some of those other things and figure out how they're going to do that. In the goal of hopefully providing a recommendation to us well enough in advance of next year's annual town meeting for things we might want to consider.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable?
It does to me.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I like that.
The only piece, again, that it's gray to me is the review of zoning bylaws. It's not spelled out. It just says bylaws in this bylaw. My suggestion might be that maybe I think I'm seeing a consensus on the board of general bylaws and only new general bylaws as far as the town meeting recommendation portion. I'm seeing a lot of nodding with that. And I agree. I think that seems to make sense. I want to make sure that is consistent with our bylaws. So my only suggestion is we agree that that's our consensus, and we ask Tim or Diane to run that by town council and make sure that is consistent with the bylaws, that we're not doing something improper, so that if we are asked that question at town meeting, we can provide the appropriate answer.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound reasonable to the board?
Yeah.
Lisa?
Yes, when will we get back? We're gonna then find what they say, bring it back to make the vote, or we're not having a vote?
I don't think we have. I think we have consensus on what we want. I think it seems like the consensus is, again, that for town meeting recommendations, that the municipal code and bylaws role is for new general bylaws and none others. If town council says, no, you can't do that, then we will do what is legal, and we'll get that information, and that's what will happen. We don't have to take any further action on that because we have to follow the law.
And I just want to say one other thing. Kristen talks about the ZBA helping with the bylaws. The ZBA is an enforcement, like the police. The legislators would be the planning board. The ZBA would be the police. The police aren't asked to write laws. They aren't asked to weigh in on laws unless there was a law that continually came up that was constantly being broken. Then they would weigh in on that. But I think there's confusion down the years where the ZBA has equal value to zoning laws. And they are an appointed body where the planning board is an elected body. And I think that I remember years past, long time ago, the ZBA was not even asked to come to a meeting about it. It was just out of courtesy that they're doing it now.
I see a hand up from the audience. Any board members want to comment now? If not, we'll come back to you shortly. Julianne.
I was just wondering, Megan, could you tell us, like, when you go over the bylaws that you would comment on, do you have some kind of template that, you know, how do you make your decisions about?
So I can't speak to the other people on the committee myself. I go through a process that I learned in professional schooling of I look at the feasibility of the policy, the harm that the policy could cause. I look at the cost, efficiency, and I also look at the social impact. And those are, it's a list of best practices for policy analysis. That is done through the policy development process. And so that's how last year I came to all of my conclusions.
Well, that sounds really good. And I wonder if, I mean, I think maybe we'd all feel more comfortable about the bylaw committee if we knew how you were coming up with your decisions and knew that you had these criteria. So maybe when you meet again, you could discuss. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julianne. Lisa?
One more. Now that I think about that, when the committee meets, you must obviously have minutes, but do you also have the YouTube availability like we're all now getting used to so that we can go and watch those meetings?
Yes, it was recorded and put on YouTube last year. So people, if they wanted to, they could watch the meeting live. They could also go back and rewatch it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I'll recognize from the audience, Scott Rogers. Scott, if you could unmute, identify yourself, and let us know what's on your mind, please.
Yes, thank you. Scott Rogers at 26 Tomahawk Drive. I initially raised my hand to argue the importance of the Municipal Code and Bylaw Committee to help the public understand all the bylaw changes, including amendments, including zoning bylaws. It's clear that the consensus of the board is not really interested in hearing my arguments on that. So I was about to lower my hand when Lisa gave an analogy about the purpose of the ZBA. And I think a better analogy, or better metaphor, pick your euphemism, is the ZBA is our judicial body, not an enforcement body. And that is a group of board members that look at particular cases and make judgments on whether that case should go forward or not. And so it's a very important body. It's very important that they continue to collaborate with the planning board and give their input on bylaw changes, proposed bylaw changes, and that the planning board continue to heed their advice on whether they're able to adjudicate efficiently on the bylaws that are put forward and be able to make those recommendations on when to allow adjustments to the bylaws, variances, and exceptions. Those are important elements of flexibility. And so they're not an enforcement body, they're a panel of judges allowing residents or others to get some relief when for their particular application, the bylaw isn't in the best interest of the town. Thanks for letting me say.
Thanks, Scott. Any other questions or comments? from the board or from Megan? So I'll repeat what I believe Lisa, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't agree with what Scott said, so it's one man's opinion.
All right, so Scott has raised his hand again. I'm going to recognize him for a second time and then repeat what I believe our consensus is. We don't need to vote on it. And then go forward. Whoops. Press the wrong button.
I think I've
Scott, there you go. I got you.
Not one man's opinion. I think you could talk with the members of and the chair of the zoning board of appeals and get their understanding of their
Try not to have too much dialogue with audience, but I appreciate your input and as well as Selectman Lisa's comments. Thank you. Select board member. I said after all of this changing, I used and I apologize for that. All right. So again, I believe that the consensus is, and everyone can just nod one way or the other, that at this time it's policy direction that the municipal code and bylaw role relative to town meeting is the review and recommendation of new general bylaws. That would be something that's not zoning. Is that reasonable to people? Okay, I see nodding all around. Megan, any last questions for us? You understand what we're looking for, and you'd be able to relay that to other members? I'd say your
Yes,
board, but you're sort of token chair.
I'll have to reach out to get their contact information because I don't have that. But yes, if it was possible, once some of these decisions are made, because it's my understanding, I may be incorrect, that the town officials will make the decisions in terms of frequencies of meetings and such. So if you could send that over to me, I would really appreciate that once that all gets ironed out.
Yeah, my assumption is Diane will be in touch with you and other members of the committee for scheduling a meeting. And either Diane or Tim, if you could reach out to council and just confirm that our consensus is consistent with our bylaws in regards to, since this particular bylaw doesn't reference zoning and or general specifically. And just let us know if we need to rediscuss at a future meeting. All good?
Yes, thank you, Mitch. I will do that. And Megan, thank you very much. I'm happy to get in touch with you tomorrow. So just as a follow-up. Thanks for coming tonight.
Very good. Megan, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
for having me.
I really appreciate it.
Okay,
Have a
take
good
care.
night.
Right.
Bye. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye. Okay, next up on our agenda, Tim, request for ARPA funding for streetlight conversion project. Tim, take it away.
Hi, good evening. I stated in a memo to you all that I found a proposal that I think Mike, one of your interim managers, got to change the street lights to LED lights. I forget the total of lights you have. I think it's actually detailed in the memo. I don't have it in front of me. But basically,
so 734.
Yeah. So this group has done over 900,000 changes of lights. They're out of Maryland. So obviously there's a long-term cost just for paying unmetered electricity from National Grid. It seems to be an electrical theme tonight. So we budget about $186,000 a year for lights. And that's outlined in the memo as well. So I'm really trying to see if the board wants to allocate any of this one-time money with ARPA to help us offset the growing future costs for electricity and get the return on investment in under 3 years, probably more like 2.5. The estimate from this company has us at an $86,000 cost versus $186,000. We know from looking at the budget, we're looking at electric bills, there is trending upwards to 10% for electricity costs that's unmetered right now. So if we can, hedge on that as we go forward, that would be good. I will tell you that if you were to approve the funding, and I don't like asking for money, I'd like to find other ways to do this. I did this in another community, and we used Green Communities funds for the project. but green communities and DOER do not fund streetlights any longer, unfortunately. I will reach out to DOER though, because I want to see if there's another vendor that might do it cheaper than the 376,015 that's in this proposal. I would say if the board were to support this, that I would come back to you with through a procurement process that we should go through and have you ratify a contract with the vendor to do those lights. As being here a short time, I've noticed there's kind of a disconnect from, town meeting making an appropriation and then the town administrator does the next step, and there's no public body to have any oversight with that. So, because I'm asking the question now, I want to commit to a procurement process that's under the law, and then have the ratification of the contract come back to the board, if you like, just so you can see, you've allocated and now we have bids, just like the energy procurement that we're going through. You'll be able to see what we got back for bids, how we did it, and then the community will see the progression of the actual project. So I'm hoping there are other providers that can do the work cheaper, but I have to go through that process. And obviously I don't want to spend a lot of time and money doing that. Well, not money so much, it's just time. If the board has no interest in changing the lights to LED. There are some other benefits. You can control these lights, you can dim these lights, you can make the lights brighter. There are nodes on top of them that can boost, at least in the other community I was in, they can boost Wi-Fi signal, help MDTs with the police department, and fire like smaller repeaters on top of those lights, which will help communication as well. So if those things can all be integrated into this, it would be a great asset for the community. So I think it's a good use of one-time revenues that you have from ARPA to avoid, that cumulative impact of electricity costs. And the savings they've estimated is 100,000. I did call all of their municipal references to verify the savings were realized. And I have only gotten 2 responses, and they both responded affirmatively that the savings that they were told they would enjoy, they are enjoying. So that's the long and short of it. If the board wants me to move forward, I want to move forward with it, but obviously I don't want to move forward if I have no money to do so. So that's what I'm here to ask you for tonight.
Great. Questions from the board. Kristen.
I just want to say, Tim, I'm so excited that you did this. This was such a nice email to get in my inbox, because it was such a creative way to be proactive for the town that no one asked you to do, or at least I don't think anybody asked you to do it. So I was just so excited about it. And it's silly because I never used to be excited about streetlights, but now I am. I'm like a new person. But it really is, it sounds like a fantastic idea. So I just have the one question though. What did you say about the fire and police? You used a term I wasn't familiar with.
A repeater?
A repeater or a node on top of the light. So we'll be able to control the lights wirelessly, but those actual devices, as long as they have line of sight, they can act as a repeater. I did that in another community. I don't know if that's part of their proposal, but I would want to get that in this proposal as well. So we can boost Wi-Fi locally, maybe outside of a school or outside of the.
I think you might mean like cellular as opposed to Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi would be, what's the connection with the internet, which I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm calling it Wi-Fi, but you could boost connectivity through your site with that particular device on top. The node on top of the light will help repeaters and help MDTs.
MDT, that was the one.
Yeah, data terminal, mobile data terminal. Those are the police cruisers have computers in their cars, those things. Right now they're operating on cellular. If they're in a bad spot, they don't always work.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Well, I don't know if I'm solving that problem. My goal is to solve that problem. My goal for you is to give us ARPA money to do the lights. If I can get those other pieces tagged on, that would be an added benefit.
Okay, super. Thanks.
Other questions from the board? Julianne?
So this is sounding better than even the email.
It just it's gonna take work. It's work. It's a good project. It saves you money long term. And that's, I mean, I'm doing the budget now, right? So I'm gonna make a little presentation to you during my report that's gonna talk about funding requests and how we're up against the levy in terms of what people are asking for. So wherever I can find a fixed cost and reduce those fixed costs for you long term, I think that's why you pay me money.
And
So-
does this cover every street light in town?
Yes, 744, did you say, Mr. Chair?
734. So yeah, your memo says 662 Cobra head fixtures and 72 decorative/flood fixtures. Lisa.
Questions? Can we add some lights that were taken away a long time ago to save money? And how would you do that? Would a neighborhood make a request to add a new head that you could add to the pole?
Yeah, a lot of communities do that now, right? So you apply to the board. Sometimes it's metered, sometimes it's put up with the permission of the board, and then they have to pay for that light. The person who wanted the light in front of their house. It's kind of an old way of thinking, an old way to do it. So short answer is, yeah, we'd have to find a system. I would start with public safety first to tell us where light, because light is the cheapest crime deterrent you can have. So if they think that there are poles that need lights, we should look at those as well and add them as we go. And the only problem with that is it adds to that 376 number.
Right.
But we would start with the police department.
All right, and then going to the 376 number, if you find somebody who was going to do this for less, what will happen? I mean, where did 376 come in, and would that be reduced by the new quote from someone who was able to get them at a lesser rate?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if say you allocated this number and we didn't spend it all, there would be a balance due back to the fund where you can then reallocate it out to someplace. I'm not going to find another place to respend it if that's what you're asking.
No, I was just wondering if it was lower, but perhaps if there was some difference, then it could be put toward those lights.
Oh yeah, the additional lights, of course, yes.
Okay. Nice work.
Any other questions? Not, I've got a couple. You used the term unmetered lights. I think that was a term you used a couple of times. Could you describe that to us?
Well, on your house, you have that round meter
Yeah.
that spins inside the glass. These are just, there's a rate National Grid comes up with for the electricity to power that light. And that's what we pay per light. And that's what gives you the $186,000 budget.
So we tell them we're changing it out. We're using this light with these specifications, and then they change the monthly or annual rate based on that.
Yes, the lumens that the Cobra overhead lights that are in the proposal draw now is significantly more than what the LED will draw, and they'll do that rate adjustments to charge less.
Okay. When I was at the MMA conference last month, I happened to be chatting with a vendor that sold streetlights, and I don't remember the name of the company, whether it was the same one or not. I have no idea. But one of the things I learned is many of these can report back to the DPW, in our case, when there's a failure. So if a lamp goes out, say on Whitney Street outside my house, DPW would get notified, and they would be notified, oh, it's because of a bulb failure, or it's because of an electrical outage, or who knows what else it can report. And then and the DPW would know about that right away, as opposed to waiting for someone to notice and eventually complain. And we know that people can take a while to complain. They'll just complain to each other as opposed to the right people that can fix it. Is that also a pretty common aspect to these?
Yes, and there's an app. There'll be an app on a phone on, probably myself, the chief's DPW director that can control the lights. I hate to use the word control. They're going to go, the winter, or the changing of the clocks, that type of stuff.
Okay.
You can stay on top of that. And then you can notify National Grid too, that the light hours have changed, and again, draw down that cost, even more.
Gotcha. And it would notify you if when there's a failure?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we would, there would have to be a third, we don't have a bucket truck, we don't have the technology or the manpower to change a light. We'd have a contract with the firm, whoever we chose, to go in and make the changes to those lights.
But at least we would know right away.
Yes.
And that's the first step. So that's great. And my last question, your request is for $376,000 or so, and in the project cost, and I know this is a preliminary estimate, is $376,000, but then there's a $61,000 incentive. So the net would be 314. Would we, if this were the actual quote, would we be paying the 376 and then get a separate rebate check back for 61, or would we be paying the 314?
I think you'd pay the total, and then National Grid will cut you a check back for the rebate. But
okay,
they change programs a lot, so
okay,
that's just another step along.
Okay. Yeah, the one thing that I'd want to understand is how would that impact ARPA funds? Would that $61,000 that would come back, would that go back into sort of ARPA where we would have to reallocate it again, or would that just go into the general fund? And that's probably a question for Jason too.
Yeah, I think you wanted to come
process.
back to ARPA. That's where it started from.
Yeah.
So we can. I'll get what you.
Yeah. And then my last question, I guess, is the prior item that we just approved for ARPA, the town meeting clickers, is relative to the amount of money that we received in ARPA is a pretty small amount. This is a pretty large amount. It would be, I think, the second largest, only to a school roof, that we've approved, and somewhat of a concern of considering this without having the consideration that we've been talking about of reviewing all of the ARPA proposals. And although at the end of the day, as I have thought about that, at the same time, this is to me such an easy one because, boy, we could save $100,000 a year by doing this. Why would we not do this? So that's, I just wanted to sort of express that I'm thinking about that, but I'm not too concerned. But this is a big bite at the apple of the ARPA funds.
And I could share the numbers if you wanted to know where you are after making the last allocation.
Yeah.
If you want to know those numbers.
If you happen to have them handy, sure.
So you're at 2,720,27, and you just spent 16,425. That brings you to 2,703,602. If you subtract 376,015 from that, it leaves you with 2.3 or 2,327,587.
Okay. Good. Kristen.
Just a comment on the ARPA money thing. I do feel like the point of the community in how to spend the ARPA money was always investing in the community. And this is investing in the community in a really good, safe way, but also in a way that will generate I feel like it's kind of easy passive money. So it's nice.
Yeah, I mean, $100,000 annual operating budget savings, that's not nothing.
No.
Lisa?
I agree with that. I think that this is something that you can say we're helping the entire community, and we're helping it for a long-term situation. So I think that's really why we've been as, thoughtful, hopefully, about our spending. I would really like to get the next, we really need to get an overview of all the other thoughts that are coming in, because we still haven't done that. I'm not comfortable letting it go much further. Again, I like this, there's no question about it, but I think that we do have to get an overview because it's going to go a lot faster. And I appreciate the work that both Tim and Bob did to look into this. And all right.
Yeah, on the overall items, Julianne has volunteered a while back to help us prepare a report of some of the earlier requests, and I know Tim has been actively seeking input from departments. for their requests. I think what I might want to do so that we can get to conclusion on that is maybe in the near future, maybe the three of us, myself, Julianne, and Tim, and certainly Diane, maybe get together and go over the process for how to bring this to the full board. Does that sound reasonable to each of you?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
great.
Okay, excellent. We have one comment from the audience on this, Mike Tejan. Mike, if you could just for the record identify yourself again and let us know what's on your mind.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, hi, Mike Tejan, 30 Augur. Tim, I in generally really like the idea. Just a couple or a few questions. The total number of streetlights, does that include or exclude fixtures at municipal buildings and schools, or is that separate?
Yeah, that would be separate. And we'd try to use mass save for those type of bulbs internally to buildings. But no, that does not include those.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just didn't know if there was an opportunity if we're changing light poles. And when I said fixtures, I meant exterior. If we're changing them all across the town, if the schools already don't have them, maybe to loop them in to enjoy some of the savings as well. And then I know, and you said you had implemented this in other towns, so maybe this isn't an issue, and you've seen them other places, but I know when like LED traffic lights first came out, I remember reading issues where in cold weather climates, snow accumulate, they don't generate as much heat as other bulbs, and snow accumulation would weigh down on them, and then there'd be structural issues. I know a traffic light is different than a metal pole holding a light, but you've never come across in your work any concerns with that.
Not at all, because it's on the bottom half of the light, so the snow would accumulate here. I haven't seen that impact
Okay.
I've had them in Grafton for 10 years, and there's been no issue like that, which is
Okay,
good.
great. And then I'm sure this would add cost, and I don't even know if the technology is out there, but right, an LED doesn't have a lot of draw. Is there any solutions that also include some type of battery backup so that if the power was to go out, the street light would continue to stay on?
I can ask either in the proposal or ask the vendor who made us this proposal.
Okay, great, thanks. Those are the only questions I had. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, related to that, if there's battery or even if there's not, I have seen some appeared to be solar operated streetlights. I don't know if a small panel above a Cobra head fixture could generate enough power to power a street light or how that all works. I imagine that would be more upfront cost, but if it's completely disconnected or partially disconnected, maybe there would be some additional savings that might be, if you're not familiar with that, it might be worth asking those questions in the process.
I made a note about solar and backup.
Great. Appreciate that. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? It sounds like we are interested in a motion.
Do I look at this motion?
You do get that one.
Well, you look at that. The type is so tiny, I'm going to need a magnifying glass. I move the board to approve the use of ARPA funds in the amount of $3,760 and no, 76 with
$376,015.
Here. For the purpose of upgrading streetlights to LED as a cost reduction strategy and for expenditure of such sum by the town administrator pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A.
Second.
Motion made by Lisa, seconded by Julianne. Any other discussion? I assume that me inserting the dollar figure that way is okay for the meeting minutes and the motion.
I mean, I have to say it again.
No, I'm seeing a nod from Diane, so we're good. Okay. Okay. There's no other discussion. All those in favor, Lisa?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Tim, Tim, thank you very much for bringing this forward. It sounded like the genesis, some of the genesis of this may have been Mike Gallagher, your interim predecessor, or whoever that was. Thank you to whoever started that, and but thank you very much for bringing this forward to us. This is a great use of money.
I would have gotten to it eventually. I just came across the memo, so I figured out, out there.
Yeah. No, thanks, Mike, too. Even though he's not here.
Yep. I saw him at the MMA conference. I'll send him a note. And let's see. Next up, we have review and consideration of select board policy regarding meeting minutes. Tim, do you want to tell us a little bit about this item?
Yeah, I'm proposing this for a couple of reasons. One is there a lot of time spent on meeting minutes from a staff perspective. And there was really nothing that they could point to in terms of the law of capturing what's required by law to get in the meeting minutes. So I just wanted, obviously the executive board who has all the authority, not over other elected boards, but over boards that you appoint, to kind of set a template out for meeting minutes. So, I had to include the language that's required to get the vote, document the vote, get the gist of the conversation, and so forth. So we have that piece. And then what some boards have lengthy meetings and lengthy minutes, and then they go to approve them, and it gets kind of convoluted. Sometimes there's no page number. Sometimes you say go to the second paragraph, third sentence, and people are trying to figure out where they're at. So, you have in the packet an example of what the numerics on the left-hand column, it looks a lot like a deposition. So it would make it easier for approval purposes, for the body of approving. So that's more of a template piece. And I guess with that, I mean, we could always, from an administrative standpoint, recommend boards and committees do that type of page number, numerics, and then add the link to the meeting itself so you can watch the meeting and not have to go search for it on every page of the meeting minutes. So it's there. So when the public reads it, you provide a greater degree of transparency relative to that public body's meeting, that they can just click on that link and go watch the meeting in its entirety. And, there's a lot of time spent with staff trying to decipher, when people make reports, this board especially, you do a lot of things with the community and you report out on everything, which is wonderful. But somebody has to listen and write all that down. So if there's and this is, I got feedback today, so I'm kind of telling on myself here, if someone doesn't make a report that is a written report, they're not mandated to give a written report. If you just off the cuff remember things you've done, we'll have to deal with that. That's just part of what it is. We'll watch the meeting and we'll document what you said and what you did. But if you have a written report, you could submit it as a document. The law does tell us that if you have like a presentation like Marlena did tonight, you have to include it in the meeting minutes anyway. So I thought it would be easier, it would be more accurate if people did it. If they did a verbal report in which they read a document, they could just provide the document. So that was the thinking behind that. So I'm trying to find transparency. I'm trying to find ease of work from a staff perspective in terms of time. And for me, everything time related goes back to money, and we just don't want to pay overtime or have people do meeting minutes that can be kind of streamlined from a template standpoint and done the way the policy recommends. I don't have the policy in front of me, so I'm looking at notes relative to the policy. So there's 3 or 4, I don't know, insightful things in there, and the rest is just state law. But I do want to see if the board wants to have any, directive to other boards and committees in terms of a template to make the meeting minutes unified and how they look, and certainly putting that link to those meeting minutes, to the meetings themselves, I think is an important requirement to have. So as much as I want to do this, I am getting feedback on, not understanding the whole report piece as a mandatory thing that people must submit. They do not have to submit a written report. So those are the essence of it. So I'm giving you, a very broad brush of this policy, if you will.
Thank you. Christian.
So I'm happy to, agree to whatever makes the most sense for the staff in the town hall. And as far as reports go for these meetings, I always type them up ahead of time anyway. And I generally read them pretty much word for word. It would be really no effort for me to email it to us, whoever's putting our minutes together. And me, I probably edit it first to make it a little more streamlined and efficient, because the meeting minutes of our reports do tend to be very like bullet points, which I think is better than the entire report anyway. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do what I'm cooperate however it makes the most sense.
Okay. Thanks, Christian. Any other comments or questions, Laura?
I do think that's a reasonable request for sending our reports, and I can certainly do that. Like Kristen, I have my notes set ahead of time. I appreciate the thought that has gone into this, and I'm hoping that this process will be streamlined. I agree. I've had to do minutes in the past for the town, and I think when I first sent it to Scott, it was a disaster. So if we can have a template for all volunteers just explaining this, I think it'll be really helpful, especially for new members that come on. So that was my first comment there. And then as far as the detail, I think that the meeting that was reported on in the example, there wasn't really anything that happened, but I was reviewing some of the.
It was the world's shortest meeting.
I know, right?
We just got to snip it.
I would love it just to have a little bit, and I find that there's like such a broad range of how the minutes look, but I don't really have time to go, for people, not necessarily for me, but if someone doesn't have the time to go sit and watch an hour-long meeting, I would like the minutes to be concise enough so that someone can know the nature of a discussion and what was said and what the outcome was. And that seems like it's pretty similar to what's been requested, but I don't know if we need more detail around that when we've got such vague minutes that come from some committees and then really detailed minutes that come from others. So that was my only thought there.
Thanks. Lisa.
I have, again, no problems, sending in our reports. I think I'd rather send in our report and have it listed as what we put in there as opposed to having it edited. I think there's a lot of information that we're doing more than, again, our prior boards have, with things that we've done or things that are going, not necessarily, appointment, go to February 26th for this sort of meeting, but having other conversations, so to speak, part of our reports are getting more detailed. And I think that they, absolutely, in order to keep our conversations at, concise manner, we have to write it down and be able to say it. And so we've already got it. And I'd rather have those submitted so that they're included. Instead of going back and saying, oh, I have to, the minutes have been changed. I want to, not the minutes, but the reports have been changed. I want to go back and clarify. And I think, it's kind of, I don't know that I've really seen that many other meetings where it's that different in the format. Like it's, the people that were present, the date that it happened, where it was held. That's all standard, right, Tim? That's
Yep. That's all standard. I just, again, for those new members, right? You want to give them something that gives them guidance and direction, just like you just had this conversation with the bylaw and codification group. If you have a standard policy that the board says, this is how we'd like to see it. Again, you can't dictate it to an elected board, but it would be nice to have unity amongst, the general public looking at your meeting minutes should look exactly the same as the Recreation Commission. Of course, they're going to say different things, but, the look and feel of it should be Northborough and unique to Northborough.
right. Now, I like the consistency. What I agree with Laura too is that, I've been working on putting minutes together, so we remember different things that we said, and going back to a YouTube link is so hard. I spend so much time just trying to find the link, even though I've clicked on it. then it gets up on YouTube, and I have to go through all sorts of rigmarole to try and find the right date. And that's very, very frustrating. Even though I'll go to the agenda and I'll click on that YouTube, and it doesn't take me directly to where I need to go. It takes me somewhere else. So
You can figure that out, because thank you for telling me that. I need to make a note of it. Sorry.
So in with that, I think that the body of the minute taking needs to be, like I know we've just gone through it with design review, there needs to be more information on there. I mean, I can put a 60-minute meeting in 2 pages, and you can get a good gist of what the meeting was. But in 1 page, which half of it is layout, you can't. You know, as we were seeing some that said as discussed, this was done as discussed, that was done as discussed. But part of the minutes are supposed to be something to refresh your memory if necessary, to be able to go back quickly and get information without having to spend an hour watching a video. So I do think that we do need to make some sort of a, expectation of being able to read minutes and understand what really happened at the meeting. So how do we put that in a policy, or can we?
Well, I think in the first couple sections, let me see if I can pull that back up. I tried to do that with restating, get the gist and collect the vote. So I don't have exactly what you're referring to relative to, as presented or as discussed. If there's no context to that. So that body approving those meeting minutes should reject those meeting minutes.
Right.
Because if there's no substance there, as presented, right? We're online, we're recording it as presented or per the memo, which has to be attached to the meeting minutes anyways. That's okay. You don't need to rewrite everything that's in the memo because it's attached. So I think you're bringing a different problem I think we have to, a summary of discussion, brief discussion on each agenda item is not as discussed. So I agree with you. If they're saying that now, we have to get with them to retrain to get them to talk about a summary of the discussion. And some communities go even further. If the vote goes 4-1, they pay particular attention to the dissenting vote and say, what's the dissenter saying? Just to capture it, because you never know, the dissenter might be right. My attempt at humor at 10 o'clock, sorry.
Well,
it was very funny.
I'll show you what I'm talking about so you can have that. But I'd rather wait, not vote on this tonight, but rather wait to just kind of clean up, any questions before we move on with it, if that's okay.
Yeah, and my feelings are not hurt. This is first time you're seeing it. My staff's just giving me feedback. I talked to Andy about it. It was all good, but until you get it on agenda and have a discussion, you never really know. So I don't expect or need you to take action.
Okay.
Julianne?
Also, since every other board and committee will be expected to follow this template, it'd be nice to get their feedback a little bit too.
Yeah, that was what I was going to suggest. Yeah, Kristen.
And actually, Julianne writes the minutes for the
interview
committee. Yes, I was like the volunteer committee. No, that's not what it's called. The interview committee, and so maybe your feedback as well.
Yeah, how do I do the numbers? Somebody's gonna have to give me a tutorial.
So I like the concept of what's suggested here of having consistent and refined meeting minutes. I think that's important. I love linking to the video. That's great. Not all committees record their meetings. That might be a subject for another day as to whether we want to improve that. There are some things, particularly the line numbers going down the left. I am not a fan. Change the font. All the line numbers are going to change. People change fonts all the time. Sometimes moving from one version of Word to another can change the wrapping and things like that. I like the idea of numbering it by paragraph or section or something, some way that you can refer to it. Also, if you edit and insert or delete a word, suddenly all the numbers can go out of whack. So personally, that piece of it I don't like. The biggest thing is I completely agree with Julianne that that we need to seek input from boards and committees that would be affected by this. And honestly, I think we should seek input also from the elected bodies, even though we wouldn't enforce that. They will probably see also the benefit of some consistency and just may have some ideas for ways of making this consistent. So I is at a high level, I really like this. But I think, we should move through and take our time to do it right if we are going to dictate how meeting minutes are done. There's also honestly a part of me that says I don't want to tell every board and committee how to do their work. We trust them to get the work done. But meeting minutes is, I could see, there are a lot of benefits of having them consistent. And something I would like to see us consider at some point is, to have a very small number of people that are doing the meeting minutes for all boards and committees, which would also give us a lot of consistency out of that and probably simplify the workflow. That's my input on that. Any other comments or questions?
One more comment. I just want to say, I think Diane was, because you used to write our minutes for a long time, right, Diane? Didn't you?
I did.
Became
I did.
assistant town
Yes.
administrator. Yeah. And I always thought your minutes were really well done. So if you want to share some expertise or some details about what worked and what didn't with this conversation, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think Diane's meeting minutes were excellent, and Linda's are also quite good. I think sometimes our meeting minutes are more verbose than they need to be, and that is every committee and individuals on committees have different opinions on that. I'm of the opinion that meeting minutes should be succinct, items discussed, actions taken, strong opinions shared. And especially when you have a video to go back on, then you go back on that for the full summary of, the full detail of everything. Because Diane, I'm sure you could say, it is really hard to take a 3-minute or 5-minute statement and compress it down to a couple of sentences and have it still be accurate if you're going to, go item by item with what everybody said. It's an impossible task.
Right.
So that's why I have over time preferred shorter and shorter meeting minutes as long as you meet the basics. When I do meeting minutes, I like bullets for the whole thing. People are probably happy that I don't do the meeting minutes because they would look it would look like bullets all over the place. But I I do like the idea of trying to get to greater consistency across boards and committees. So, my suggestion is, maybe we, try to refine this one more time and then send something out to boards and committees for their input before we consider any action. That sound reasonable?
I think that sounds
We
good.
can do that.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Very good. Anything else on this item before we continue?
Great job, Tim.
Yeah. Thank you for
thank
bringing
you.
this forward. Next is vote to authorize the submission of the Accelerated Repair Program ARP Statement of Interest (SOI) for the Marion EZ School Roof Project. This is another MSBA project. I know there's no one from either the school committee or Central Administration School Office, so I suspect, Tim, this is yours.
All I have is the memo. I haven't been able to connect with Greg in the past. He called me last week and we just never connected. But the memo's self-explanatory. You're not on the hook for anything. You just simply have a letter of support to make the request to MSBA to look at the project to get it in the queue.
So we've tried to do this once before with the Proctor roof. Board members may remember a couple of years ago, we approved a statement of interest, and then the MSBA pulled the plug on all roof projects, the funding. So that's how we ended up funding that entirely on the town side. The MSBA has opened that up again for the repair projects, and they're interested in getting in the queue for that. I'm pretty familiar with these. Once this goes in, the state would pay, usually it's around 50% of roof projects. And then, the town would have to approve the other part. We don't know how quickly it would go through the process because the doors were closed for a couple of years. There are probably a few, or more than a few roof projects out there that might be ahead of us in the process. But we don't get on the list unless we ask. That's about where this is.
Let's do it. I'm ready to do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, this doesn't commit us to anything other than the downside is if we get approved from the state and then we say, nah, we don't really want to do it, or we want to wait another 5 years, it doesn't look good from the state's point of view. I have no idea if anyone has done an estimate on what this might cost. That's certainly a question that I would ask if the superintendent were with us tonight. He's not. That's it. We know the Proctor roof ended up being, I think, 1.7 million. But I don't know how large this is, the Proctor part of the roof that was replaced versus this part of the Z School roof. But it's, roofs aren't cheap on schools.
Shall I read the motion?
Sure.
Very long motion.
Thank you.
You're also excited to hear me read a long motion again tonight?
You do such a good job, Kristen.
I guess. I move the board vote to authorize the school superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated during the month of February in 2024 for the Marianne E.Z. Elementary School located at 33 Howard Street, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future for replacement of the EPDM and shingled roofing system under priority number 5, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of such an application, the awarding of a grant or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Northborough to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Kristen, seconded by Laura. Any other discussion? All those in favor, Kristen?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Congratulations to the school department on moving this one forward. Next up, we have execution of election warrant for the March 5, 2024 presidential primaries. Tim, do you want to just tell us what we're doing here, although it's kind of obvious?
You don't need me for this. It's
yeah.
It's a
we're required by law to do it.
You're required to sign it. I can't help you.
Yeah.
No discussion.
Laura?
My only comment is that if we can continue to look at other voting locations, I'm really not fond of the idea of voting taking place at Milliken. And the more that I've thought about it, there's just too many loopholes in that plan. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was noted for today.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we had that conversation obviously a few months back. And I hope that we'll be able to improve that in the near future. Probably not the very near future. It would probably be sometime after calendar year 2024. It sounded like from the discussion with Andy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Okay, appreciate that. Lisa?
Going to work on taking it out of the schools. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think he was going to, look on as to ways of yeah, finding alternate locations, which might be multiple locations.
Well, we've done that in the past, but I think there's such a strong desire to get it out of the schools that I think it's about time we did our best.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Again, I anticipate that that we'll hear from Andy. You know, we'll schedule that for you know, probably in the fall after the fall election, because Andy had said that, you know, we wouldn't be able to make any changes by then.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully he'd have something in place. Yeah. All right. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to execute the election warrant for the March 5th, 2024 presidential primaries.
Second.
Motion made by Julianne, seconded by Kristen. Any other discussion? All those in favor, Julianne?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. The election warrant is approved. And next up, we have reports. Let's see. Laura, any reports tonight?
I will be really quick. I attended the Community Preservation Committee meeting 2 weeks ago. They discussed 432 in great detail. They had really great points on both sides of the decision. So I'm grateful for all the thought that they put into that. I wanted to highlight that the police put a post up. There was a grandparent scam. If anyone is experiencing any odd phone calls with, you know, desperate needs from family, please either call the police, contact your bank, contact someone before you go and take money out. It's just really, they're getting really crafty in their attacks. I attended the Kindness Week kickoff. I wanted to thank the Community Affairs for all they do to bring kindness back to the community. If you visit their website, they've got a great list of suggestions for things that you can do. I was grateful to see all the beautiful chalk art at the library tonight with all these great messages, which is probably going to be gone tomorrow. And I wanted to wish the Doll Men a very happy 10th anniversary. They'll be celebrating that on February 21st. So if you wanted to stop by the Senior Center at 10 a.m., they'd love to see you as they celebrate this exciting milestone. That's the end of my report.
Great. Thank you very much, Laura. Let's see. Julianne, any reports tonight?
Just two things. We received an email from Mr. Swee about changing the cable committee to a media advisory committee and really updating their tasks. And I would like us to discuss that and maybe get a presentation from him or from Dana. And also the idea of listing on the website in a really obvious way current projects. I thought that was also another really great idea. And maybe if it's just Tim's report, which kind of updates us on things, but that's it. People are always asking, and it'd be an efficient way to do it. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Julianne. Yeah, I like the idea of looking into ways of reusing or repurposing the cable committee. That might, are you okay if we wait until after town meeting to do that? So we can focus on town meeting preparation before then? Or would you rather have a discussion on that sooner?
Well, the only thing is, can we use cable for some educational purposes? There's some really, you know, you and I went to the coffee today and people were saying how, you know, a lot of the population probably don't know about the MBTA housing and all the specifics and information. And if we could use cable to do an educational thing about that, that might be helpful.
So I think that we have a cable department, which is staffed, which can do those programming things. The cable committee or some version of it would look at technology, maybe policy, maybe participate in negotiation of future licenses, things like that. I think it's a different with some overlap of an aspect. I like the idea of what Dick is suggesting. It's a matter of finding the right timing to do that.
Yeah, I'm okay with waiting.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, any reports tonight?
Oh my gosh, they do have reports tonight. All right, what to start with first? What I'd like to say tonight is I would first like to extend our condolences to Adrienne Cost's family. She passed away on February 8th. She was presently are the chairman of the Council of Aging and has served on many boards and committees.
I'm sorry, she was vice chair. She had been past chair.
Oh, past chair. Oh, all right. I was reading her obit. And the calling hours are Wednesday, the 14th at Hayes Funeral Home between 10 and 11:45 in the morning, but there will be a private funeral to follow at noon. Adrian dedicated her life's goals toward the betterment of others, and I think it's someone that we should, anyone, that gets themselves so involved in community efforts and all should be recognized, and we've done that, and I really want to send that out to her family. Okay, Mitch and I attended a tree, what is it? It's not a symposium, but it's
Yeah, it was the Massachusetts Legacy Tree presentation by the Garden Club.
Yes, which was quite interesting, and I think that it was good to see more importance placed on trees. Obviously, there's a 10-year notification on this tree, and you can re-up it. This is so many ages. You were there a little bit longer than I was at this meeting, so I have to defer to some of what you learned about. But that it says through the Legacy Tree Program and the National Champion Tree Registry, the Department of Conservation and Recreation and Forestry Program formally recognizes the largest and most interesting known tree of each species, of each historical origins, and other trees of unique and significant importance growing within the state of Massachusetts. They said that we had two in Northborough. One was at
Edmund Hill Trail. It's a magnolia tree. That's the only one that I thought was mentioned.
Well, they said two, and then they got into a discussion. But then we mentioned that there's a very large beech tree that's at the White Cliffs, and that we should probably do something to get that application going because, after all, we don't have some notoriety in town. Okay. Also, the Sustainable Northborough Citizens Group, there's upcoming walks going on. And Jean Cahill had sent a notification out to everybody actually on the email today. And it says the series invites community members to learn from the regional organizations with expertise in water and land management from local leaders. First walk focuses on the scenic downtown riverfront of the Assabet River, touring the dams and the reservoirs along Hudson Street, which is scheduled for February 23rd. That's Friday at 1:30 p.m. It's limited to 20 people. There is an RSVP. I've already RSVP'd, but we've been talking about doing something with our waterways, and part of that being our economic development and having waterways and recreation to kind of bring more, more importance into the town. And I also I went to the water and sewer meeting, and they were discussing the dam that we're going to be opening up in Shrewsbury. And at the end of that discussion, I had asked Scott Charpentier, the DPW director, about the dam that was at Bartlett Pond. And I was told that that dam has been damaged and it can't be raised, the water level can't be raised or lowered. And that was something that a neighbor had told me about, Laura's father, as a matter of fact, that they used to control the vegetation by raising, by lowering the water in the fall and raising it in the spring, and that hadn't been done for a while. And we have put money aside to take care of cleaning that pond a few times. I'd like to know what the disposition is. One year it was too late, another year it was too early, but we did put money aside for town meeting, and I'd like to know what was actually used and if we're going to have it done this year, because that pond really could use a lot of work to clean it up. Okay. The other thing I'd like to bring up is that last week, or our last meeting, Julianne had a report on our responsibility for replacing shade trees in the town. And I don't believe it. We've replaced one shade tree in all the trees we've cut down in decades. Can't hold me to that, but I know I've been here for 20 years, so I haven't seen that. And I'd like to be able to, maybe at our next meeting, get all the information that we need to put together to be able to put maybe $8,000 to $10,000 of our money aside to a tree replacement fund so that we can start doing something with that and having a program together so that we can make a presentation for that. Okay.
Lisa, I'm sorry to interrupt. If specific item for ARPA, I'm not sure I understand that well enough to schedule that. Maybe you could put that in an email form.
Yeah, we were discussing the possibility how to put it together, because I think and going down all the different things that have been in ARPA, this was one of the things that people had been asking for. Okay, the next question I have is whatever happened with complete streets? In 2022, Northborough had a presentation. Megan McDevitt, who's a project manager with Woodland and Curran, said the complete street is when a road has been designed and operated to encompass all internal modes, all alternative modes of transportation for all ages and abilities. And that these streets are designed to think of safety, health, economics, and different things that make your community more livable. Back in August of 22, the town launched a survey to gauge feedback from the residents on both prioritizing projects and identifying future projects. According to the planning director, Lori Connors, the overwhelming response from residents identified pedestrian and bike network connections as the most important type of eligible project. It constituted 49.4% of results. The residents said the top impediment to walking was lack of sidewalks and sidewalks that link neighborhoods to downtown Northborough. Commercial areas, parks, and playgrounds were among the pedestrian amenities highest rated as most needed. And she's quoted as saying, people wanted sidewalks that actually go somewhere. So this is now February of 2024. I don't believe we've even seen a sidewalk go in. I don't think that the engineering has been done to do any of that. We were told that of the $500,000 or maybe $400,000, that was the next level that we were supposed to be working on. The staff at this time presented a list of 25 proposed projects throughout Northborough. So I'd like to know how we can get this back on track and start working on that. So that's something that, I don't know, your recommendations on how we should do that, Mitch.
Yeah, no, I will ask Tim to speak with Lori Connors to see if we can get even just a memo update as far as where we are with complete streets and see whether it is ready for any board decisions or actions.
Okay, so I can submit this to you, Tim, too, so you can see that. This was an article that I actually took out of the Community Advocate. It's quite easy with all the information. Okay, and okay, my last question, just what do you want to call it? Remarks are on the Blake Street project, and I'm concerned about what we're hearing or what's been happening, or the way that we don't have enough time when we make a decision. I don't think to. We hear a presentation, okay, that sounds wonderful, and then we think about it, and then we hear different things. And in the case of Blake Street, there's been a lot of people who come up to me and said, it's a very small street. Why are we trying to make it Newberry Street? What's going to happen? I even heard the trees were going to be cut down, and I want to put a hold in it until we can get some more information. It was pretty vague. I asked to speak to Laurie about it. She told me not to worry about it. So I wanted to make a meeting with her and Tim to talk further about what was going to be going on there. First off, I don't want any trees cut until such time as there's actually going to be something done. We've seen too often that trees just get cut down and then the project sits there for years. And it looks awful. It's not good for the environment. And I don't want to see that happen down here on Blake Street.
So we've approved the money for design. We have not been presented or approved any money for construction. So I wouldn't anticipate there, relative to anything that we've approved, there to be any trees cut down.
Well, I hope not. But as I say, I really need to get some more information on it. I'm not comfortable with the, it's very vague. And
My suggestion is set up a meeting with Tim and Lori and try to work through those questions. Thank you.
And we have some new volunteers, which I'm very excited about. We got I think 6 new people that came on board, and we're always looking for new people. So thank you for those of you who have volunteered, and if you've stayed long enough to watch the meeting, come on and sign up. We need more bodies. Thank you, and that's the end of my reports.
Thanks, Lisa. Christian, any reports tonight?
Hi, yeah, thank you. So the Northborough Police Department just recently formally received its 7th consecutive accreditation award. And this is a big deal because not all police departments in Massachusetts have this accreditation. It basically means that the police department has pledged to adopt standards that are considered best practices in law enforcement as a way of doing business on a daily basis. So congratulations to them for that. And I don't know if people realize this, but I guess they're in the packet, and monthly the select board gets reports from the fire and police departments. And I'm just going to tell you that in those, you can find all the things you don't know that are going on, because a lot of them happen like behind the scenes or at night or whatever. Even if you watch all the meetings in the world, you still don't know these things. So just a few interesting facts from the reports. There was a really funny picture of 2 of our police officers, Officer Agio Mavritis, if I said that right, I'm sure I did, and Officer Henry literally mopping up the flooded senior center. So those guys can be counted on for lots of random jobs. Also, that they did an Alice drill. The police did an Alice drill at Algonquin. And they're arresting people for aggravated assault at Cumberland Farms, all kinds of crazy things. So the fire department, recently too, this was a little troubling to me. They received an anonymous email advising the fire department there was an odor of gas in a building on Bartlett Street. In the picture, it looked like a particular building. I don't know if I should say which building it looked like. The employees were still in there working, and I don't know who this person is, but they felt they needed to send an anonymous email to the fire department. Luckily, they responded quickly. They did find high levels of gas in the building, and upon investigation, found a broken gas line on the roof. So the building was evacuated. The gas was secured. So thank you very much to the Northborough Fire Department for doing that. They made repairs and got it inspected, and everything went back to normal. But it did say in this fire report, which Chief Parenti writes, a reminder, I believe he writes, I'm pretty sure he writes it. I know he does all the charts and graphs, but it says a reminder to all that 911 is the best way to report a hazardous condition to avoid unneeded response delays. That's a really polite way of saying, please just call 911. And it's, I hope everyone feels comfortable calling 911 for whatever reason, but anyway, yeah, please just call 911. There was also a car fire and a gas main leak and all these other things people don't know about that the fire department and the police department are taking care of all the time. And I also noticed they have a web page for the fire station project. So I thought at some point, maybe I'm on the town hall feasibility study committee. Maybe at some point we need a web page for the town hall updates too. And I unfortunately don't have a ton to share. We have had a meeting since our last meeting, but it was again pretty preliminary. And if there's anything really important people should know, Tim will probably tell them because he was there too. And just a quote for the impending snowstorm. Just so you know, snowflakes are one of nature's most fragile things, but just look what they can do when they stick together. They can fill up your driveway and make it so you can't go anywhere. That's by Vesta Kelly, who I looked up to see who that is, and I still have no idea who that is. But there's a lot of quotes by this person. So anyway, that ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I've got a couple of things. I attended about 2 weeks ago a remote meeting in the Massachusetts IT CISO Council, CISO Council, which is a Chief Information Security and Risk Management Officer related meeting. Basically, it was a meeting with town officials from around the state discussing cybersecurity threats to municipalities. I think I'll be a regular attendee at those meetings that they will take place every couple of months. Very, very interesting. As I think many people already know, the fire station project, the schematic design phase has concluded and is off to a cost estimator now. We have another meeting Wednesday night of this week, and then we anticipate getting the cost estimates back by the end of February. The town library, the Northborough Free Library, had not an official award, but looking at the statistics, we're the 7th highest in the state for program attendance for libraries in our size range for population, which I think is 15 to 20,000 people, which is really, really good. We have a lot of programs at the library and a great attendance at the library. And looking further in, at the data, you can see that program attendance also relates to other uses of the library, withdrawal of books and things like that. I want to thank Isabella Caruso, our interim health director, for updating the odor complaint form for the farm at the north end of Whitney Street to make it more generic and useful for other things, both for concerns about that site as well as other sites. It's really, really a good change to what was already a very useful form on the town website. You can get to that by going to the health department page, and there's a complaint button. I also attended, as Lisa mentioned, the Legacy Tree event by the Garden Club at the library, and I just want to ask the DPW and all our safety officials to be safe tomorrow in the storm that has. As of a few hours ago, it already canceled school for tomorrow. And I know, Tim, you had all the municipal offices closed, people working remotely. I think that's very good to be proactive in that account. And that concludes my report. Tim, any reports tonight?
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the FY25 budget. So I need the board to be comfortable with the actions we've taken to date. So I'm going to try to run through this. This is not the last time you'll hear about fiscal 25. Don't worry about it. I'm going to give you a lot of stuff to think about, but there's no test. But this won't be it won't be one and done, because there's obviously a lot of moving parts here. But we have information, and as I got it, I wanted to share it out with you. So back in January, we asked department heads to submit budgets for what they need to run their departments. I can tell you that, every department that I met with, there's not a lot of excess room in their budgets. There's no fat, either in the 24 budget or in their request for 25. Once their budgets were submitted, we did meet with every department head. So Jason and I, once he started on the 15th of January, we started meeting with every department to get a clear understanding of what their needs actually are. I think there's been a lot of pent-up demand from departments for their actual needs. So it was important to go through that process. And obviously, we're balancing that against available funds. So we're currently establishing and scheduling meetings with the Appropriation Committee and Financial Planning Committee with the goal of having a public hearing with the board for March 25th. So I think that's a part of a requirement in the charter anyway. So we're looking at March 25th to have that. Our approach to the budget was fairly simple, right? Jason and I looked at year-to-date revenues. We looked at year-to-date expenses and try to trend those things forward. And that's how we knew, like, little pieces about a 10 to 12% escalation in electricity, either in the rate or, if there's some inefficiencies in our systems with lights being on too long or after hours that we need to correct. So we'll do that. In terms of revenues for the fiscal that we're in, We're on target. There's no major issues. There's no major issues with expenses. Snow and ice is still under budget. I think there's 47,000 left. This storm may tell a different story after we get through it, but that's where we're at now. And I think the other fundamental thing is we're trying to balance revenues. When we look at revenues and, any increase in revenues that we receive in a fiscal year generates free cash, and any savings that we have from an operating budget also generates free cash, which funds your capital plan. I know you all know that, but just for the viewing public, I figured I would cover that one more time. From an operational perspective, these departments look at their budgets on a minimum, a monthly basis. We're required by law to send them out a report that they have to review. It's better for us to get them a monthly document that we can have a discussion about, but they also can view all their line items with the Munis system that you have. It's just a good policy, and procedures are in place relative to, how they look at their operations from a funding perspective and from a spending perspective. So Jason told me today that there's no major shortfalls to worry about. Of course, there's no major windfalls at this point either. So we covered snow and ice. I'm just going to cover some high level things relative to what's allowed under Prop 2.5 in this community. So your revenues will be about $2.4 million. So your what's allowed under 2.5, your new growth, and then some adjustments we've made for revenue. Our number for earned interest, because interest rates are going higher, is just blowing our estimate out of the water. So we know we can increase that at least for one more fiscal year. So there's things like that we look at. Trying to find my particular pieces. There's some cost drivers in fiscal 25, like health insurance, Worcester County retirement. And I know I've mentioned this before, the solid waste contract is up June 30, and we're going through a process now of trying to find another waste hauler. We're waiting on one more quote from one company, and we may end up having to go out to bid again. We'll have a short window to do it, but we think we can pull it off. But at least our initial estimates have that increasing by $252,000. The Worcester County retirement is increasing by $315,000. And health insurance, the Ken from EBS Foreign is telling us to look at a 10%. It's probably more like a 9%, but 9 or 10% is still $610,000. So those things, those three items of fixed costs are $1.1 million. So when I talk about 2.4, that's what you have for new money, not including your excess levy, but 2.4 is new revenue under the 2.5 allowance. 1.1 of that is already absorbed by three items. And then we go through and we look at the school department's request, and their modest request, in my opinion. We have to, they'll go through the process with these committees as well, but their total 2.4. That includes Assabet, Algonquin, and K through 8. So that's 2.4. So we're already, that number there eclipses everything you have under Prop 2.5. So the department's requests, again, were modest, but if we were to include them all, it's a 10% increase over fiscal 24. So when we look, when I was in another community and we try to offset these increases to tax bills, we looked at things like energy aggregation. So it was important that you all thought about the cost in driving down other things that we can do to offset automatic increases in the budget, which is going to automatically lead to increased property tax bills. So I have that in the backdrop of my mind. Wherever we can reduce ongoing cost for someone and have a value add, like you're doing with the energy aggregation, even though we cannot promise a savings for energy aggregation, that's the desired intent, or at least it was in the other community I worked in to do that. So it's important that you're thinking about those things too, because I have to offset those costs someplace and not just put a budget together that'll be balanced under the levy, but the impact to the taxpayers is of concern. We're not just doing this in a vacuum. I covered what the schools asked for, the fixed costs, your cash position. You are in very, very good shape. Your free cash is 3.5 million. You know all these numbers, so I won't belabor it, but you have capacity, which I haven't enjoyed in too many communities, which is great. Your reserves are 12% compared to your general operating budget, which is an amazing spot to be in. So financially, you're in great shape. We just want to continue to maintain that. So over the coming weeks, we'll work with these two committees and internally to, enhance revenues and reduce costs wherever we can. You took a huge step tonight. It's only the $100,000 in savings provided when I can get these lights installed, but that's a big deal. That's going to offset obviously 100,000, hopefully in fiscal 25, that we can move around, reallocate, or just eliminate altogether. But I wanted to give you a sense that, between Jason and I and the committees and staff, we take the budget very seriously, and we take the fact that there's going to be an impact to the taxpayer, and we don't take that lightly, and we want to minimize that impact as much as possible. So that's my 7-minute presentation on the budget. It's not the last, and there's more to come.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Does that conclude your report?
It does.
Okay. It was a very substantive report, of course. Diane, any reports from you tonight?
Not tonight, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Concludes that. Next, we have a cemetery deed number 1183. Is there a motion?
There is a motion. Just have to find the motion. I move the board to vote to execute cemetery deed 1183.
Second.
Motion made by Lisa, seconded by Julianne. All those in any discussion? All those in favor, Lisa?
Aye.
Julianne?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. Deed is approved. Is there any other business for us tonight? Oh boy, lots of things. Lisa?
Just real quick, and I forgot to say this in my reports. One of the things I found wonderful with the police report this month, was that they had a full photograph of the entire group in front of the library that Brian had done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be great if we were to do that with all the departments and put their pictures up on our wall in the town hall and also in the annual report as they used to do. I think it's a sense of community and teamwork and that sort of thing, and recognition for the fact that, these are hardworking, staff members and police and fire. And I just think it would be nice to have. So I'd like to try to look into that for the future.
And if I can comment on that, I'd love that, because I think it would make the staff, I mean, they're already wonderful in how they interact with the community, but it would create a really neat relationship and enhance that part of our community and help with the recognition. So I love that idea.
Okay, thanks. Julianne?
I have a question for Tim about the budget. There's been a lot of support for adding police officers. Was that discussed in the budget?
It was discussed outside of the budget because it was a transition between two chiefs at the time I was making the request.
Oh.
I know the Chief Griffin wants more officers, so I'm very much aware of it, and it's a priority for me to find a way to fund them. I just want to set the expectation because a lot of, I guess I'm making an assumption about where you're hearing the support is relative to around traffic. And I don't want anybody to think that if we hire 1 or 2 police officers, it just won't be traffic. There'll be law enforcement that'll have traffic related duties. Griffin and I met Friday and we talked about, and we looked at the parking situation for the trucks off of Bartlett, trying to find a solution. And we just don't want to have a inappropriate expectation that it'll only be traffic that this 1 or 2 officers do. So I want to make that clear that it'll be law enforcement if we add them.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And then I also would be very interested in hearing more about the Blake Street project, because I did get some, I think, very insightful comments about, you know, why are we doing Blake Street not in conjunction with 4 West Main, but we have to figure out 4 West Main. So if Lisa meets with people and she could report back on that, that'd be great. And that's it.
Julianne, you could certainly participate in that meeting as well, as long as it's not a quorum.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
One more.
Yeah. Is that everybody on the new business? Okay. Next up is our final public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us for comment or ask us any questions? I'm not seeing anyone. Going once, going twice. Public comment is closed, and I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Julianne, seconded by Kristen. All those in favor, Julianne?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Laura?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Vote is unanimous in favor. We are adjourned at 10:57 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and stay safe tomorrow.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good